The girl who hid Jewish children. Have you ever held a secret so big, so important, that just thinking about it made your heart pound? Not a secret about a crush or a surprise party, but one that could cost you everything if it was discovered. During World War II, many people faced this terrifying choice. They saw their Jewish neighbors, families just like theirs, being hunted and taken away. Here's the thing, some individuals, even teenagers, decided they could not, would not, let that happen. Think about a young woman, maybe 16 or 17. Her name might be lost to history, but her actions echo loudly. She knew the terrible risk. If German soldiers found Jewish children hiding in her house, her entire family faced prison or worse. Her own life was on the line, but still, she opened her door. Every day, she lived with a constant knot of fear in her stomach. She cooked meals in secret, shared her own small bed, and became a silent protector. She gave them not just food and shelter, but a fragile thread of hope when all hope seemed gone. She gave them a chance to simply be. It's a lot like when you see someone smaller, someone helpless, being cornered by a bully. You know stepping in means you might become the target. You feel that fear, that hesitation, but imagine choosing to stand tall anyway, to become a shield for someone who couldn't defend themselves. This girl understood that. She became that shield. Her hidden rooms were like safe cocoons, letting tiny frightened butterflies shelter and grow. When outside a storm raged, trying to crush them, her courage wasn't loud or celebrated at the time. It was a quiet, constant act of kindness, hidden in shadows, whispered only in urgent, soft tones. It was a daily no to cruelty, a choice to keep humanity alive when others tried to extinguish it, and that's why it matters so much. Her story reminds us that even in the darkest times, when the world seems to have forgotten its goodness, there are always people who choose light. They show us how simple decency, even in small, secret ways, can bloom into life-saving hope. So, we remember her, and all the others like her, because their quiet strength saved futures we can only begin to imagine. The cook who spied on the enemy. Have you ever stopped to think about the quiet heroes? Not the ones you see in movies, but the people who blend into the background, doing everyday jobs. This is a story about one of those quiet people during World War II, a man whose uniform was an apron, not camouflage. He was a cook, but here's the thing, while he cooked meals for the enemy soldiers, he was also spying on them. Imagine that. Day after day, he chopped vegetables, stirred pots, and served food, all while his mind was sharp, watching every gesture, listening to every casual word. He was gathering secrets, right under their noses. War often forces people into roles they never expected. It shows us that bravery isn't just about charging into battle. Sometimes, it's about having the courage to pretend, to listen, and to notice. This cook understood that even the smallest details could be important, that a whispered plan or a new supply shipment could change everything. Think of it like this. A great chef can tell if an ingredient is slightly off, just by its smell or texture. They pay attention to tiny clues. This cook was doing something similar, but his ingredients were information, and his dish was freedom. It's like when you're playing a game, and you notice a tiny symbol or a strange sound that helps you figure out a hidden message, even if everyone else misses it. Those small observations, pieced together, can lead to big discoveries, and that's why it matters. This cook, with his unassuming role, reminds us that heroism wears many faces. It isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes, it's quiet, observant, and happens in the most unexpected places. It's a gentle reminder that every single person holds potential for courage, often hidden in plain sight, waiting for the moment to make a difference. Pilots who flew without glory. When you think about World War II pilots, what pictures come into your mind? Maybe you imagine daring aces, flying fast planes, shooting down enemy aircraft in thrilling dogfights. You probably think of the heroes, the ones who got medals and newspaper stories. But here's the thing, for every pilot who became famous, there were hundreds more who flew without ever seeing their names in headlines. They are the pilots who flew without glory, yet their contribution was just as real, just as vital. These were the men who did the quiet, steady work of the skies. Their missions weren't always about dramatic battles. Sometimes, they flew long, lonely patrols over vast oceans, watching for submarines that might never appear. Other times, they transported critical supplies, flying slow, unarmed planes through dangerous skies, knowing every delivery mattered. They were the ones who scouted enemy positions, gathering information that generals needed to plan attacks, or maybe they flew search and rescue, risking their lives to find a downed airman in the middle of nowhere. Their jobs were often boring, sometimes terrifying, but almost always unheralded. Think about a school play. Everyone cheers for the main actors when they take their bows, but what about the stage crew? The people who silently move props, adjust lights, or make sure the sound works perfectly. You don't see them, and they don't get the applause. But the play couldn't happen without their careful, steady work behind the scenes. That's a bit like these pilots. Their work was the foundation, the unseen effort that kept everything else going. Their courage wasn't about a single moment of flashy bravery, but about showing up every day. It was in the quiet determination to complete a mission that might never be noticed, knowing that even a small part could help win the war. Their legacy isn't written in bold letters, but in the lives saved, the supplies delivered, and the critical information gathered. They remind us that true bravery often lives in the shadows, in the steady heart of someone just doing their part, even when no one is watching. Their stories are a gentle whisper of duty, telling us how much ordinary people can achieve through extraordinary quiet courage. The mechanic who kept planes flying. When we imagine heroes from World War II, our minds often go straight to the pilots soaring through the sky, or the soldiers on the front lines. Right, we picture the brave faces, the medals, the cheers. But here's the thing, for every pilot who flew, there was a whole team on the ground, working tirelessly, often out of sight. They were the mechanics, and their quiet dedication was just as heroic. Imagine a plane, a powerful machine meant to defend and protect. It doesn't matter how brave the pilot is, if the engines sputter or the landing gear jams, a plane is just a pile of metal if it can't fly. These mechanics were the ones who breathed life back into those machines. They worked day and night, sometimes in terrible weather, under the constant stress of war. Their hands were often cut, stained with oil and grease. They fixed bullet holes, replaced worn-out parts, and tuned engines until they roared just right. Every bolt tightened, every wire connected, was a small victory, a piece of hope. Think about a big sports team. Everyone cheers for the star player who scores the winning goal, and that's great. But what about the coaches, the trainers, the people who make sure the equipment is perfect, or the field is ready? Their work is vital, even if they don't get the loudest applause. In the same way, these mechanics were the essential backbone of the air war. They knew that if their work wasn't perfect, a life could be lost. So their bravery wasn't just in facing enemy fire. It was in the endless hours, the careful checking, the deep understanding of every single part. It was in making sure a machine, designed for war, could carry its crew safely and, hopefully, bring them back. Their names might not be in every history book, but their silent contributions echo through the skies. A powerful reminder that true strength often comes from the unseen, dedicated work that allows others to soar. Secret messages from a school desk. Have you ever passed a secret note in class? A tiny piece of paper, folded small, passed quickly under a desk, hoping no one sees. Imagine if that note wasn't about a crush or a joke, but about life and death. During World War II, this was reality for many. People needed to communicate vital information right under the enemy's nose. Sometimes, these messages were hidden in the most unexpected places. A school desk, for instance, wasn't just a place for textbooks and doodles. It could be a drop-off point, a place where a small, coded message was tucked away. These weren't always complex spy gadgets. Often, it was simpler, a tiny scrap of paper, a drawing with hidden meaning, or even a book with certain words underlined. These messages carried incredible weight. They could warn of danger, share resistance plans, or simply let families know someone was still alive. Think about the way we use invisible ink, like lemon juice that only appears when heated. Or how a QR code looks like a jumble of squares but holds a whole website link. These wartime messages were like that, but often even more low-tech and desperate. A child's drawing might have a subtle detail that only a trained eye would spot, telling a story of troop movements. A worn-out book left on a specific desk could signal a secret meeting time. It was about seeing beyond the obvious, understanding that the everyday could hide the extraordinary. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What secrets do our everyday spaces hold? These silent acts of defiance, these brave whispers from a school desk, remind us of something profound. Even in the darkest times, the human spirit found a way to connect, to resist, to hope. It tells us that courage isn't always a loud roar on a battlefield. Sometimes it's a quiet, tiny folded message, placed with trembling hands, waiting to be found. It's a testament to the powerful, hidden strength in ordinary people, changing the world, one secret message at a time. When farmers saved Allied pilots, what happens when war lands right on your doorstep? Not with a roaring army, but with a lone, scared pilot falling from the sky. For many ordinary farmers during World War II, this wasn't a movie scene. It was a real, terrifying choice. Allied pilots, shot down behind enemy lines, needed help, and often that help came from the most unexpected heroes, the farmers living quietly in occupied lands. These were not soldiers in uniforms. They were men and women tending their land, raising their children, trying to survive. But when a plane was shot down, and a pilot parachuted into their fields, they faced a decision. Would they turn away, pretending not to see? Or would they open their homes, risking everything for a stranger? To help meant unbelievable risk. If the enemy found out, it meant prison. It could mean torture. It could mean death for their whole family. Yet, countless farmers across Europe made that brave choice. They hid pilots in barns, disguised them as farmhands, and shared their precious food. They created secret routes, passing pilots from one safe house to another, a human chain of courage stretching across countries. Here's the thing about their bravery. It wasn't a sudden, grand act on a battlefield. It was a quiet, daily resistance. It was a deep human instinct to protect someone vulnerable, even when danger stalked every shadow. Think about it like this. If you found a lost, hurt animal, your first thought is usually to help it, right? Now imagine if helping that animal put your own family in grave danger. That's the kind of choice these farmers made. But for a human life, their actions weren't written in history books with big headlines, but they were life-changing for every pilot they saved. Each quiet act of kindness, each hidden meal, each whispered direction was a small candle in the deepest darkness. It reminds us that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet choice to do good, to stand up for humanity, even when no one is watching and the stakes are everything. And that's why their hidden bravery truly matters. The nurse who faced down bombs. Have you ever felt a fear so big your heart pounds, making you want to run? Imagine that feeling, multiplied 100 times, with bombs falling closer. What kind of person stays put, stays calm, when the world around them is exploding? This is the story of nurses in World War II, women who chose to heal and comfort, even as death rained from the sky. Their job wasn't just bandaging wounds, it was holding hands, whispering hope, and being a steady presence in pure chaos. They worked in field hospitals, makeshift clinics, sometimes just tents. The danger was constant. Planes flew overhead, dropping bombs that shook the earth. Buildings crumbled, fires raged. Most people would panic, but these nurses had a different courage. It was a quiet strength, a decision to serve life, even when death felt so close. Think about a time you've been really scared. Maybe before a big test, or speaking in front of everyone. Your stomach might have done flips. Now, imagine feeling that, but also knowing people depend on you, their lives in your hands. You don't run, you don't hide, you take a deep breath, and you do your job. It's like being in a huge thunderstorm, scared, but still checking on your little brother or sister, making sure they're okay. That act, doing what's right despite your fear, that's what these nurses did every single day. They knew the risks, they saw the horrors, yet they kept going. Their bravery wasn't fighting with weapons, it was fighting for life itself. It was choosing to be a source of calm and care when everything else was tearing apart. Their stories remind us that true heroism isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just the quiet, stubborn will to protect others, no matter the cost, no matter how loud the bombs get. It's about finding that steady courage inside you, even when the world shakes. Building ships while her sons fought. Have you ever thought about the true meaning of strength? Not just the kind you see on a battlefield, but the quiet, steady power that keeps going when everything feels uncertain. During World War II, countless women faced this challenge every single day. Their sons, their brothers, their husbands, they were far away, facing incredible danger. And these women, they weren't just waiting, they were working. They went to factories, to shipyards, to places where the noise was deafening and the work was hard. They learned how to weld, steel, how to rivet metal plates together, how to build the very ships that would carry supplies, soldiers, and hope across vast oceans. Think about that for a moment. Each rivet they hammered, each piece of steel they shaped, It wasn't just a part of a ship. It was a silent prayer. It was a piece of their heart, sent out into the world with their loved ones. This wasn't just about doing a job. It was about connection, about keeping a promise. It's like when you're working on a big project for school, and even though your friend is sick, you push yourself to do your best, because you know your effort helps them. These women pushed through exhaustion and fear, knowing that every ship they built could bring someone closer to safety, closer to home. Their hands became instruments of their love, shaping the metal, shaping the future. Their daily effort, often unseen and unpraised, was a profound act of bravery. It showed that strength isn't always about holding a weapon, but often about holding on to hope, even when your heart aches. They built ships, yes, but more deeply, they built a powerful testament to human resilience and the unbreakable bond of family. And that's why their quiet, determined spirit still resonates with us today. The artist who drew for freedom can a simple drawing truly fight a war, not with bullets or bombs, but with quiet strength. During World War II, when darkness spread across the world, many heroes didn't carry guns. Some carried pencils. They were artists who chose to draw for freedom, even when freedom seemed lost forever. Imagine living in a place where everything you knew was taken away. Your home, your freedom, your very identity. For people caught in concentration camps or occupied towns, survival was a daily struggle. But here's the thing. Humans are more than just bodies. We have spirits, and those spirits often refuse to be broken. So, some people used art. They made secret drawings, tiny carvings, or poems whispered in the dark. These weren't for fame or money. They were for something far more important. Freedom of the mind, freedom to remember, freedom to hope. Each line drawn was a small act of defiance, a quiet statement that said, "You can take my body, but you cannot take my soul." These acts were incredibly dangerous. Discovery often meant severe punishment, or worse. Yet, the human need to create, to express, to connect, was stronger than the fear. Think about a time you felt really stressed or lonely. Maybe you doodled in a notebook, or drew something from your imagination, and for a moment, didn't that small act of creation make you feel a little bit better, a little less alone? It's like your mind finds a safe space, even for a short time. For these artists during the war, their drawings were like that, but on a much deeper level. They were a way to hold on to their humanity, their memories of family, or a future they dreamed of. They drew the faces of loved ones, or even the harsh truth around them, simply to say, "I see this. I am still here. I am still human." So, a drawing, a quiet line on paper, became an act of incredible, silent bravery. It reminds us that even when the world tries to crush our spirit, our ability to create, to imagine, and to find beauty can never truly be taken away. That small, quiet act of making art was a powerful way to say, "I am free, inside my own mind." And that, truly, is why it matters so much. A school teacher's secret radio. Have you ever thought about the hidden lives people led during the war? Not casual secrets, but deep, dangerous ones that could change everything. During World War II, many heroes didn't wear uniforms. They looked like regular people. Imagine a kind school teacher, helping with math or reading stories. But after school, this teacher had a different, incredibly risky job. They might have hidden a small radio receiver or transmitter, perhaps in an attic or under floorboards. In occupied countries, knowing the truth was a luxury, a weapon even. Governments controlled all news. They told people only what they wanted to hear. But these secret radios picked up news from free nations, real news, or they sent vital messages to resistance groups, sharing enemy movements or plans. This wasn't just breaking a rule. It was an act of extreme courage. It was a silent battle for truth. Each static crackle, each whispered code, was a defiance. Think of it like a huge, confusing jigsaw puzzle. The only way to solve it is to get tiny, accurate pieces of information. Each bit of news, each message sent, was one of those crucial pieces. Without them, the bigger picture, the fight for freedom, would stay blurred. It was about seeing clearly when everyone else was forced to look away. These teachers, these quiet messengers, risked everything. Their bravery wasn't loud or seen on a battlefield. It was a quiet hum in the dark, a small light when hope felt dim, and that's why it matters. Their secret radio calls were whispers of defiance, reminding us that even ordinary lives can hold extraordinary courage, changing history one quiet, dangerous signal at a time. We remember them not just for what they did, but for the choice they made, to be a voice when silence was expected. Helping prisoners escape, one bite at a time. Have you ever felt trapped, like a problem was too big to solve? Imagine that feeling, but magnified 1,000 times, inside a prison camp during World War II. Here's the thing about hope. Sometimes it arrives in the smallest packages, even in a piece of bread. In those dark days, people found incredible ways to fight back. One quiet, brave method involved helping prisoners escape, not with big, dramatic plans, but in tiny, almost invisible steps. They used things like food parcels, letters, and even everyday tools, transforming them into lifelines. Think about it. A seemingly harmless item could carry a hidden map, a tiny compass, or a message telling someone what to do next. It was about smuggling freedom, one quiet delivery at a time. This wasn't about grand gestures. It was about persistence, about a deep belief that every person deserved to be free. The people on the outside, often ordinary citizens, faced huge risks just to pass these things along. And the prisoners, with every hidden item they received, felt a surge of hope. It's like knowing someone out there remembers you and is fighting for you. This kind of courage, the kind that whispers instead of shouts, often changed everything. It's a lot like learning a really complex dance move, or maybe building a giant Lego castle. You don't do it all at once, you break it down. First, you learn one small step, then another, or you put one brick on top of another, slowly, carefully. Each tiny action, each hidden compass or whispered instruction, was a crucial step in a much bigger, more dangerous dance towards freedom. These small acts of defiance, these quiet moments of bravery, remind us of something profound. Even when the world feels overwhelming, even when problems seem impossible, a single, determined effort can start a chain reaction. It shows us that true strength isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's found in a quiet, steady resolve, proving that even a small bite of hope can eventually lead to freedom. The teenager who blew up a train. What does courage truly mean? Is it shouting your name for everyone to hear, or is it a whisper in the dark, a secret act only you know? During World War II, many heroes fought openly on battlefields, but some fought in the shadows, far from any spotlight. Imagine being just 15 years old, still figuring out who you are, what you want for dinner. Then imagine living in a world where your home isn't truly yours anymore, where soldiers from another country patrol your streets. Now, imagine being asked to do something that could end your life, or change the course of a battle. This is the story of a teenager who, fueled by a fierce love for their country and a burning hatred for injustice, made a choice no child should ever have to make. They stood against a powerful enemy, an army that had taken over their homeland. The fear must have been immense, a cold knot in their stomach. But underneath that fear, a fierce determination burned. So here's what happened. This young person planted explosives on a train track, not a toy train, but a real one, carrying enemy soldiers and vital supplies. Think about the pounding heart, the cold sweat, the absolute silence before the blast. This wasn't about glory or wanting to be famous. It was about slowing down the war machine, about giving their people a chance. It was about saying, "We will not give up." It's like when you're building something complex, say, a huge Lego castle. If one small, crucial support piece is removed, the whole structure weakens, causing delays and problems. This teenager's action was like removing that crucial piece from the enemy's plans. Their story makes you wonder about the incredible strength that hides inside ordinary people, even young people. It reminds us that courage isn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes, it's a quiet decision made in the face of impossible fear. It's a choice that echoes through history, showing us that even the youngest hearts can hold the most powerful light, a light that pushes back against the darkness. Dogs that carried secret notes. Imagine a secret, a really important one that could change everything if it fell into the wrong hands. Who would you trust to carry it? Your best friend, maybe someone even more loyal, someone who wouldn't speak a word. During World War II, when radio signals were easily jammed or listened to by the enemy, soldiers often needed to send messages silently. That's where dogs came in. These weren't just pets, they were trained heroes. They carried tiny notes, often hidden in special collars or pouches, through dangerous battlefields, past enemy lines, to deliver vital information. They were sometimes the only way to get a message from one post to another, especially in places too risky for a human runner. Think about the incredible trust involved. A soldier would send a dog off, knowing that dog held the lives of many in its paws. The dog, in turn, trusted its handler completely, following orders even when bombs were falling and gunfire roared around them. This wasn't just about speed, it was about loyalty, courage, and a silent promise kept between species. These dogs ran missions where humans might not have survived, becoming the quiet, brave bridges between 2 points of desperate need. It's a bit like when you have a big secret to tell your friend across the schoolyard, but you can't shout it out for everyone to hear. You write it down and slip it to someone you absolutely trust to deliver it discreetly. But imagine that schoolyard is filled with unseen dangers, and the message is life or death. These dogs were the ultimate, silent messengers, moving with incredible purpose and bravery. Their stories remind us that heroism comes in many forms, sometimes on 4 paws. These dogs didn't understand the complex politics of war, but they understood duty and devotion. They teach us about the pure heart of loyalty, a quiet courage that doesn't ask for medals or parades. They just did their job, bravely, leaving behind a legacy of silent heroes who helped shape history, one secret note at a time. It makes you think about all the unsung quiet acts of bravery, doesn't it? The man who fixed radios in hiding. Have you ever felt completely cut off, like your phone died, and suddenly you couldn't talk to anyone or find out what was going on? Now, imagine that feeling across an entire country during a war, with terrible dangers all around. That was the reality for many during World War II, especially for people resisting occupation. Their link to hope, to freedom, to truth, was often a radio. And here's the thing, radios back then weren't like today's easy tech. They broke, they needed experts. So, imagine a man, hiding in a tiny room, a cellar or a dusty attic, carefully taking apart a broken radio. Each wire, each tube, a tiny puzzle piece that could mean life or death. The enemy wanted to control all information, for people to feel alone, to believe only what they were told. But secret resistance groups needed to share news, plan actions, and tell the outside world what was happening. A working radio wasn't just a machine. It was a voice of defiance, a lifeline. Think about it like this. Your school needs to send an urgent message, but the internet is down, all the phones broken. One person, quietly, secretly, manages to fix just one phone, allowing that message to get through. That one fix changes everything for everyone. This man was doing that, but with much greater stakes. His work was invisible, silent, but incredibly brave. Every hum he coaxed from a static speaker, every signal he brought back to life, was a small victory against silent oppression. These forgotten heroes remind us that courage isn't always loud battles. Sometimes it's the quiet skill, steady hands, and the deep belief that truth must find a way through, even in the darkest of times. Women who drove ambulances on the front. What does true courage really look like to you? Is it always loud, or can it be quiet, yet incredibly powerful, even in war's chaos? During World War II, many heroes weren't carrying guns. They were driving ambulances, and often, these brave drivers were women. These drivers raced into danger zones, places where bullets flew. Bombs exploded to pick up wounded soldiers and get them to safety. Society expected women to stay home, but these women chose an incredibly brave path. They drove heavy vehicles on dark, dangerous roads, facing horrific scenes. Every bumpy ride, every injured soldier loaded, was a raw reminder of war's brutality. They saw humanity at its worst, yet offered comfort and hope. Their job wasn't to fight, it was to fight for life, against the clock and constant threats. This was their front line. Compassion, their tool. Speed, their only defense. Imagine in a game, someone gets hurt. Even as action continues, someone rushes over, totally focused on helping. These women were like that, but their game was a global war. Stakes were life or death. They were the calm, steady presence when everything else was falling apart. So, let's remember these quiet champions when we think of heroes. They never fired a shot, yet faced death every day. Their courage wasn't about violence, it was about healing. True strength comes from kindness and the fierce will to save others, even when fear is everywhere. Their stories show us a different bravery, shining brightest even in war's darkest moments. The librarian who organized resistance. What if the quietest person in the room held the loudest power? During World War II, libraries, usually filled with hushed whispers, became nerve centers for resistance. We often think of heroes with uniforms, and weapons, but some of the bravest acts happened in plain sight, hidden by everyday routines. Take a librarian in Nazi-occupied Europe. Their job was about books and order, but under occupation, information became dangerous, controlled, censored. A good librarian understands connections. They know people seeking knowledge, networks of thinkers. They know who needs to read what, and how to get it to them. This wasn't just about novels. It was checking out hope, blueprints for escape, hidden messages. Here's the thing. Think about your school librarian. They know everyone who comes in, who likes what, how to find tricky information. Now, imagine using all that skill, not for a history project, but to save lives. That's what some librarians did. They used their quiet organizing skills and networks to create secret communication lines. They moved banned books and secret documents. They organized safe houses, connecting those needing help with those who could give it, all under the cover of their daily work. It was like being a spider at the center of a delicate web. Every thread was a person, information, an act of resistance. They connected them all, without anyone seeing the bigger picture. Their bravery wasn't loud. It was methodical, brilliant, and incredibly risky. This reminds us that courage isn't always a roar. Sometimes, it's the soft rustle of a page, a quiet word, a silent nod. True heroism can be found in the most unexpected corners, protecting the human spirit from being silenced. Code names and quiet bravery. What if your name wasn't just your name, but a secret code? A name chosen not for who you are in sunlight, but for what you might do in the shadows. During World War II, countless brave people took on new identities, special code names. These weren't nicknames for fun. They were shields. Each one protected missions, hidden information, and often the families they left behind, who could never know the true danger. Each whispered code name carried a heavy, silent promise to serve, to protect secrets, and to vanish if captured. Think about that. To willingly give up your own name, the one your parents gave you, the one that ties you to your whole story, to every memory you've ever made. It meant stepping into a different skin, becoming a new person entirely. Sometimes even learning a new accent or a new past. This wasn't about seeking glory. It was about becoming invisible, yet doing the most important, dangerous work imaginable. This act of renaming yourself, of letting go of who you truly were for a mission, was an act of profound, silent courage. It meant carrying two lives at once, the person you truly were, tucked away deep inside, and the person the mission demanded. The emotional weight of that secret must have been immense, a constant, quiet hum beneath every conversation. It's a bit like having a big, important secret project for a competition you can't tell anyone about yet. You might call it Project Starlight or Operation Phoenix, just between you and a trusted friend. You know all the details, all the risks, but to the outside world, you just go about your normal day. Now, imagine that secret project wasn't just about winning, but was a matter of life and death for thousands of innocent people. Imagine carrying that alone. These code names hide stories of quiet bravery that still echo today. They tell us that true heroism doesn't always roar for attention. Sometimes, it whispers a hidden name. Sometimes, it takes on a different identity and works in the quiet, forgotten corners of history. In those hidden names, we find a deep truth, that some of the greatest sacrifices are made by those who never sought to be known at all, only to do what was right, to keep others safe. Their quiet courage shaped our world. The sailor who saved his crew after a sinking. What happens when the worst fear comes true? Imagine being out on the vast, dark ocean during World War II, a young sailor far from home. One moment, you're standing watch, feeling the ship's engines hum beneath your feet. The next, a blinding flash, a deafening roar, and your world is chaos. The ship is sinking, fast. You're thrown into freezing water, surrounded by the screams of friends and the groaning of metal. Here's the thing about those moments. Panic can take over. It's easy to just give up, to let the icy cold numb your senses. Thousands of sailors faced this fate, lost to the depths. But sometimes, in the deepest darkness, a different kind of light appears. It's not a searchlight from a rescue ship, not yet. It's the light of one person's unwavering will. Think about a tough moment in your own life. Maybe a project went completely wrong, or a friend was really struggling, and you felt overwhelmed. You might have just wanted to quit. But what if, instead, you found a quiet strength inside you? This is what happened for a particular sailor. His ship was gone, but he wasn't. He saw the despair in the eyes of his crewmates floating around him, injured and shivering. He didn't just save himself. He knew he had to save them too. He gathered them, one by one, into a life raft or onto debris. He spoke calmly, even as his own teeth chattered. He made sure everyone got a share of the meager water. He tended to wounds, and he kept their spirits from completely breaking. He told stories. He gave them a job, a purpose, anything to keep them focused on living. Day after painful day, under the merciless sun and through the terrifying nights, he willed them to survive. He taught them that even when everything is lost, you still have your courage, and you still have each other. This isn't just about floating until help arrives. It's about choosing hope when all signs point to despair. It's about one human heart refusing to let others fade away. This sailor, like so many forgotten heroes, shows us that true strength isn't just about what you can destroy, but about what you can build back up, even from nothing, with just your voice and your will. And that simple, profound choice can be the greatest act of all. Making maps under enemy eyes. Have you ever felt truly lost? Not just lost on a street, but lost without any guide. Imagine needing to know every hidden path, every enemy checkpoint, every safe house, and having no one to tell you. In World War II, some heroes faced this exact challenge. They had to create their own maps, right under the noses of their occupiers. This wasn't a game. This was about survival. People in occupied countries needed to guide resistance fighters, help downed pilots, or move supplies safely. Official maps were controlled by the enemy, so they couldn't use them. So, ordinary people, sometimes just teenagers, became secret map makers. They would walk through villages, remembering details, or sketch outlines in code. Maybe they'd pretend to look for mushrooms, secretly noting an enemy guard post. Every tiny detail mattered. Think about copying notes from a friend in class, but you can't be obvious. You glance, scribble, act natural. Imagine if getting caught meant prison or worse. That's the kind of pressure they lived with. These brave souls risked everything. Each line drawn, each symbol placed, was a quiet act of rebellion. Their maps became lifelines, guiding freedom fighters through darkness, showing them where to strike and where to hide. It was a secret language of hope. And here's the thing, these maps weren't always beautiful or perfect. They were often rough, hurried sketches, but they held immense power. They represented the human spirit's refusal to be lost, even when surrounded by despair. They show us that sometimes courage is quiet, careful, drawn on a piece of paper, charting a path to a better tomorrow. The shopkeeper who fooled the Nazis. What does true bravery look like? It's not always about capes and superpowers. Sometimes it's just a regular person doing something incredibly difficult because it's right. Imagine a quiet shopkeeper, someone you'd buy candy or bread from, putting his own life on the line every single day. This is a real part of World War II. When heroes walked among us, their tools were their sharp minds, kindness, and courage to act when others wouldn't dare. During the war, when Nazi Germany took over countries, life became terribly dangerous for certain groups, especially Jewish families. They were hunted, forced from their homes, and faced terrible things. But in those dark times, some ordinary folks couldn't just stand by. They found quiet ways to resist. Our shopkeeper, Jan, owned a store, but behind the counter, Jan was sheltering people in secret rooms. He used his shop as a clever front, a disguise for his life-saving work. When Nazi soldiers came by, Jan would act perfectly calm. He'd sell his goods, chat casually, maybe even offer a smile. He knew lives depended on his flawless performance. It was like a silent game of hide-and-seek, with high stakes. Think of a clever magician, making things disappear right in front of your eyes. Jan's trick was keeping people alive, hidden in plain sight. His steady routine, his calm manner, became a shield. Every polite conversation, every sale, was a deliberate move to protect those hidden behind his shop's walls. It wasn't about big, loud acts. It was about quiet, constant, incredible bravery, day after day. What can we take from Jan's story? Courage doesn't always wear a uniform or deliver a speech. Sometimes, it lives in the choices of someone who refuses to let fear win. It reminds us that even when things feel hopeless, one person's quiet decision to be good can shine a bright light, and that light can change everything. When kids delivered important messages, have you ever had to keep a really important secret for someone? A secret that truly, deeply mattered? Imagine that feeling, but multiply it by 1,000. and add the real danger of war. Because during World War II, when telephone lines were cut or tapped, and radio signals could be traced, messages still needed to get through, and sometimes the most unexpected heroes were chosen for this silent, vital task. Children. These kids weren't soldiers, but they walked through occupied towns, their small hands often clutching secrets far bigger than themselves. No one suspected a child wandering down a street, perhaps playing or just running errands, but tucked into a pocket, sewn into a doll, or hidden in a lunch pail. There might be a coded note, a map, or a warning. These weren't just pieces of paper, they were lifelines. They carried information that could save entire villages, warn resistance fighters of a raid, or guide a downed pilot to safety. It's a bit like when your best friend trusts you with a message for someone else, and you have to deliver it perfectly, without anyone else knowing what it says. But here, the stakes were incredibly high. If you failed, if you were caught, the consequences were terrifying, not just for you, but for everyone relying on that message. It took immense courage, a kind of quiet bravery, to carry such a heavy burden, day after day. They didn't wear uniforms, but their footsteps were just as important as any soldiers. These forgotten young messengers remind us that courage isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's a whisper, a silent walk, a determined heartbeat. It's about trust, and about how even the smallest among us can carry the weight of a world in desperate need of hope. The doctor who treated both sides. So imagine you have a special skill, a gift to heal. But what if a terrible war breaks out, and the people desperately needing your help are on both sides of that bitter fight? What do you choose to do then? This is the story of certain doctors during World War II who faced that impossible question. They were trained to save lives, to ease suffering, no matter whose life it was. Their uniform might have been for one country, but their heart often saw only a person in desperate need, not an enemy. Here's the thing. Doctors take an oath, a promise to help the sick and injured, to do no harm. It's called the Hippocratic Oath, and it doesn't ask about your nationality or what side you're fighting for. In the brutal chaos of war, these doctors had to look past enemy lines. They had to remember that beneath every soldier's uniform, whether it was German, American, Japanese, or British, there was a human being bleeding, scared, and in pain. It was a profound choice to value life itself above all else, even when hatred and violence filled every moment. This wasn't just about giving medicine, it was about a deep belief in our shared humanity. Think of it like a sports referee in a heated game. The ref doesn't care which team you root for. Their job is to make sure the rules are followed fairly for everyone, protecting all the players. These doctors were like that, but with actual lives on the line. They saw the wound, not the flag the person fought under. It takes immense bravery, a quiet kind of courage, to treat someone who, just moments before, might have been trying to hurt your own people. They didn't win battles, but they reminded the world that even in the darkest times, compassion and care can still shine through. And that's why it matters. It reminds us that even when humanity feels broken, there are always those who choose healing over hatred, showing us a path towards a more understanding world. Building bombs in a hidden factory. Have you ever wondered about the quiet places, the shadows, where truly important things happened during the war? It's easy to picture soldiers on battlefields, but sometimes the most crucial fights were won far away from the front lines, in hidden factories. Here's the thing. People, often women, worked in complete secrecy, deep underground or camouflaged in forests, building the very bombs and weapons needed to fight back. Imagine going to work every day, knowing that if anyone found out what you were doing, your life, and the lives of those you loved, would be in extreme danger. This wasn't just about making something, it was about protecting a secret that could decide the fate of nations. Think about a really big project at school, one where everyone depends on you, and if you mess up, it affects the whole class. Now, imagine that project is life or death, and every moment is filled with the low hum of machines and the silent prayer that no enemy spy ever finds your hidden workplace. That's the kind of pressure these people lived under. They poured molten metal, assembled intricate parts, and packed explosives, knowing each bomb carried both the hope for victory and the terrible power of destruction. It was a heavy burden, a strange mix of courage and dread. They hated war, I'm sure, but they understood that sometimes you had to build the tools of conflict to achieve peace. They weren't just manufacturing weapons, they were crafting a desperate hope, piece by painstaking piece, in places the world forgot to look. their quiet labor, out of sight, carried an immense weight, a testament to how far people will go when everything they believe in is on the line. The photographer who showed the truth. Have you ever wondered if what you're told is always the whole story? Especially during something as big and confusing as a world war. It's easy for facts to get blurry or for details to be left out. But then, there were people who stood right in the middle of the fighting, not with a gun, but with a camera. These photographers weren't just snapping pictures. They were showing the raw, honest truth of what was really happening. Think about it this way. You might hear a news report about a faraway disaster, and it sounds sad. But here's the thing. When you see a photo from that same disaster, maybe a person helping another, or a building that's been destroyed, it feels different. It feels real. It suddenly lands right in your heart. That's the powerful job these photographers had during World War II. They captured moments of terrible sadness, yes, but also quiet bravery and true human spirit, even when everything around them was chaos. They showed the actual cost of war in a way no article or radio program ever could. This can help you understand something deep. Imagine someone tells you about a really difficult day a friend had. You might feel bad for them, but if they show you a picture of their face at that exact moment, maybe tired or upset, you connect with their experience on a much deeper level. You see the feeling. These photographers did that for the war. They pulled back the curtain from official announcements and propaganda, showing the difficult, messy, and often heartbreaking reality. Their photos weren't just random shots. They were proof. They were like loud shouts, urgent warnings, and strong reminders that war isn't just something leaders decide. It tears apart real people's lives and their towns. The bravery it took to stand there, aiming a lens at such destruction, knowing how much danger they were in, is amazing. They didn't just record history, they helped us truly understand it. And that's why their work still matters so much today. These images make us remember, make us feel, and hopefully, make us learn from what happened. They remind us that the truth, even when it hurts, is super important for building a clearer future. Smuggling food to those in need. Imagine being so hungry your stomach aches all the time. Imagine seeing your family getting weaker, their faces thin. This was the terrifying reality for millions of people during World War II, especially in countries occupied by enemy forces. Food was often taken by the invaders, or it became incredibly scarce. So, what did people do? Many became food smugglers. This wasn't about stealing for greed. This was about secret missions, often under the cover of darkness, to bring potatoes, bread, or even a handful of beans across borders, past checkpoints, and into hungry communities. It meant risking everything, freedom, even life, to help others survive. People believed that a life-saving act was more important than any cruel law made by an enemy. Here's the thing, when basic survival is on the line, the rules change. The act of sharing food became a powerful way to resist, to say, "You will not starve us into submission." It was an act of deep, quiet courage. Think about it like this. If a classmate was truly struggling and couldn't afford a warm coat in winter, and you found a way to secretly get them one, even if it meant bending some school rules, wouldn't you? That's the same basic human instinct. It's the deep, caring part of us that sees someone in pain and feels an urge to help, even when it's dangerous. These heroes weren't famous generals. They were ordinary people, often with very little themselves, who chose to put their own safety aside for someone else's hunger. And that's why these stories matter. They remind us that human kindness, that stubborn, powerful need to care for each other, can bloom even in the harshest ground. It teaches us about the extraordinary strength found in simple, everyday acts of compassion. It tells us that even when the world feels broken, the human spirit finds a way to mend what it can, one smuggled loaf of bread at a time. The soldier who never fired a shot. Can someone be a hero in a war without ever pulling a trigger? It's a question worth thinking about, especially when our minds often jump to brave soldiers charging into battle. But the truth is, World War II wasn't just about gunfire and explosions. It was a massive, complex effort, and countless people contributed in ways that never involved firing a weapon. Yet their courage was just as real, and just as important. Imagine the young men and women who served as medics. They ran onto battlefields unarmed, into the thick of chaos, to rescue wounded soldiers. Their mission was to save lives, not take them. Or picture the engineers, working tirelessly to build bridges under constant threat, or repair critical railway lines so supplies could reach the front. There were also the quiet heroes like the truck drivers, navigating treacherous, bombed-out roads day and night, making sure food, fuel, and ammunition got where they needed to be. Or the radio operators, their voices calm but firm, relaying vital messages that could change the course of a battle, all while in constant danger. Every single one of these roles demanded incredible bravery, resilience, and a deep sense of duty. Here's the thing, their bravery wasn't always a sudden burst of action. It was often a quiet, steady kind of courage. Think about a big group project in school. Everyone sees the person giving the presentation, right? But someone else might have spent hours organizing notes, double-checking facts, or making sure everyone had what they needed to succeed. Their work isn't always in the spotlight, but the project couldn't happen without them. That's a bit like these soldiers. Their quiet, steady efforts formed the backbone of the war effort. They faced danger, exhaustion, and loneliness, sometimes more isolated than those on the front lines. Their battles were often against fear, fatigue, and the immense pressure of their responsibilities. Their stories remind us that true strength comes in many forms. Sometimes it's a loud roar, and sometimes it's the quiet, persistent beat of a heart determined to serve, to support, to simply keep going. And that's why their unseen heroism shines just as brightly. Quiet heroes in the supply lines. When we think of war, we often picture soldiers on battlefields, brave and strong. But have you ever stopped to wonder about all the things those soldiers needed to fight, let alone win? Food, water, bullets, medicine, fuel for tanks and planes. All of that traveled thousands of miles, across dangerous oceans and broken roads. These were the supply lines, and the people who kept them moving were heroes too, though often unseen. Imagine your own body. Your heart is vital, right? It pumps blood. But what about the veins and arteries? Those quiet pathways carrying blood, oxygen, and nutrients to every part of you. If those pathways get blocked or break down, the heart can't do its job. The whole body suffers. In World War II, the front lines were the heart. The supply lines were the body's veins and arteries. They worked constantly, quietly, tirelessly, facing bombs, bad weather, and enemy attacks. Think about a soldier in a foxhole, freezing and hungry. A hot meal and a warm blanket from a truck driver could save his life and spirit. A medic with fresh bandages and penicillin could save dozens of wounded men. These roles were often filled by people who never fired a shot, but their courage was immense. They faced submarines, air raids, and treacherous landscapes, all to make sure others had a chance. Their work was a silent promise. You are not alone. We are supporting you. These quiet heroes remind us that bravery comes in many forms. It's not always found in battle's roar, but often in the steady, relentless effort to keep life moving, to bring hope, to ensure that even in the darkest times, every person has what they need to endure. Their legacy shows how crucial every role is, how every quiet act of service builds towards something greater, something heroic. The firefighter who saved history. Have you ever thought about what we lose when an old building burns down? It's not just the bricks and wood, it's the stories inside, the memories etched into its walls, the history it holds. During World War II, cities across Europe faced constant bombing. Imagine priceless art, ancient books, and records of human genius being turned to ash in a moment. It wasn't just lives at risk, but our shared memory, our understanding of who we are as people. Many brave folks fought fires, but some saw more than just flames. They saw history itself, flickering, and reached out to save it. Why save a painting when bombs are falling and people are starving? Here's the thing, art, books, music, these are what make us human. They carry our past, our hopes, our dreams. If we lose them, we lose a piece of our soul, our ability to learn from those who came before. It's a lot like losing all your family photos and videos. You still have your family, but so many moments, so many memories just vanish forever. Think about a big project you've worked really hard on for school. Maybe a report with rare pictures, or a science fair model that took weeks. If that got ruined right before it was due, you'd feel more than just sad. You'd feel like a piece of your effort, your learning, was erased. Well, imagine that feeling, but for an entire city, an entire culture. One such hero was a firefighter in London. He didn't just put out blazes, he knew what each historic building held. As bombs fell, he and his team raced through crumbling, smoke-filled streets. He wasn't thinking about fame or medals. He was thinking about a fragile medieval manuscript, an old statue. a stained glass window that had been there for centuries. He risked everything, not for gold, but for the beauty and knowledge that connect us to generations long past. He put his life on the line so that future generations, like us, could still see, read, and understand where we came from. Sometimes, true bravery isn't just fighting an enemy directly. It's fighting for what makes us human, for the things that remind us of our shared journey. It's about understanding that some treasures are not just valuable in money, but priceless for the soul of the world. And that's why his quiet heroism speaks to us still. He didn't just save buildings, he saved pieces of our collective heart. A village that hid an entire army. Can you imagine keeping a secret so big, so vital, that hundreds of lives depended on it? One wrong word could mean death for everyone. During World War II, in the shadow of war, some villages did exactly this. They became living shields, protecting soldiers, pilots, or refugees from the enemy. Here's the thing, when an enemy takes over your land, helping the other side is incredibly dangerous. Yet, in places like Larchambon-sur-Lignon in France, or small Dutch communities, ordinary people made an extraordinary choice. They opened their homes, their barns, even their churches. They shared meager food, created false papers, and helped people disappear, all while living under the enemy's watchful eyes. Don't think about your class working on a huge project, like a play or a big presentation. Everyone had a role, right? Someone did research, someone built props, someone memorized lines. If one person messed up, everything could fail. Now, imagine that project wasn't just about a grade, but about human lives. That's what these villagers did. Every farmer, shopkeeper, every child played a part in this silent act of kindness. It wasn't just about walls and roofs. It was about a shared heart. It was a belief in action, that every life mattered, and helping others was a duty, no matter the cost. Each hidden person was a flicker of hope, kept safe by a community choosing courage over fear. These quiet acts, multiplied across homes, proved that even a small village could be stronger than an army. It shows us that when people unite for good, their shared will can create miracles, even in the darkest times. The woman who flew planes across oceans. Have you ever thought about what it means to be truly alone, high above everything, with only your machine for company? During World War II, with so many men fighting, planes still had to move. Here's what happened. Brave women stepped up. They weren't in combat, but their flights were vital, often dangerous. Don't imagine a young woman, maybe like an older sister, climbing into a huge bomber cockpit. She'd check maps, get instructions, then take a deep breath and fly. These were fairy pilots. They moved new planes, sometimes across whole oceans. Thousands of miles of open water, no land in sight. No GPS then, no easy call for help, just a compass, a map, and their amazing skill. It's a bit like having your most important school project. You have to get it across town, all by yourself. If it breaks, it's all on you. Now, picture that project as a giant plane, and town as an ocean. That's their challenge. They battled icy winds, engine trouble, and the terrifying silence of an endless sea below. Each flight tested their courage and focus. Their work saved many lives, freeing male pilots for battle. Yet, after the war, many of their stories were quietly forgotten. We see heroes as those on the front lines, and they are. But sometimes, true heroism is quiet dedication. It's showing up daily, doing the hard, unseen work that keeps things moving. It reminds us that courage isn't always a loud shout. Sometimes, it's the steady hum of an engine, carrying a forgotten hero through the clouds. How a singer boosted morale. Have you ever wondered if a single voice, a familiar melody, could truly make a difference during a huge, scary event like World War II? It sounds simple, but in those incredibly tough years, singers became a lifeline. Imagine being a young soldier, maybe just a few years older than you, far from home. They were scared, lonely, facing danger every day. Or picture families back home, listening to the radio, hearts heavy with worry. Life was unbelievably difficult for everyone. Here's the thing, people needed more than basic supplies. They needed hope. They needed to remember what peace felt like, what home meant, and why they were enduring so much. This is where singers became unlikely heroes. Their voices, carried by radio waves, traveled across oceans, reaching battlefields and quiet living rooms. When a favorite song played, it wasn't just sounds. It was a powerful feeling, a warm hug, a reminder of home, a short escape from fear. It helped people feel less alone. like a friend was nearby. Think about how you feel sometimes. If you've had a tough day, or something sad happened, what helps you feel a little lighter? Maybe you play your favorite song, or watch a comforting show, or just chat with a friend. That brief moment of comfort, that reminder that joy still exists, that's what these singers gave to millions. They were like bright beacons, cutting through the darkness of war. Their songs weren't just tunes. They carried messages of staying strong, of love for home, and the promise that peace would return. It's a powerful idea, isn't it? That art, in its purest form, can be a shield against despair. A simple melody has the strength to mend a tired spirit, even for a short while. These musical heroes reminded everyone, from soldiers on the front lines to families waiting back home, that they were part of something bigger, a shared human struggle, with hope as their guide. Their music wasn't just entertainment, it was a vital, invisible thread of courage, stitching together a world needing to heal, and that's why their legacy still matters today. The codebreaker who changed the war. Have you ever tried to keep an important secret, one only you and a few friends could understand? During World War II, nations relied on such hidden messages. Every military order, every plan, was code, scrambled letters and numbers that looked like nonsense. Here's the thing, for every country sending these codes, another worked tirelessly to break them. They needed to know enemy plans. Where were they going? What were they thinking? This was a silent battle, fought with sharp minds, pencils, and paper. Imagine sitting alone, day after day, staring at gibberish. Yet, you know clues are there, clues that could save thousands of lives. Changing the war, it's a bit like solving a hard puzzle where the answer feels just out of reach. Now imagine that puzzle holding millions of lives. One hero, often working in shadows, was a cook. Their name isn't famous, but their work was as vital as any soldier's. They fought with their brain, patiently piecing bits, finding patterns no one else saw. This person slowly understood the enemy's secret language. Each crack of code gave their side a huge advantage. Leaders could almost read the enemy's mind, predicting their next move. Think how one correct word changes a message, or even a huge battle. The codebreaker's job was lonely and stressful, but it shows us that heroes aren't always in the spotlight. Sometimes, the most important battles are won in quiet rooms, by people pouring their focus into a difficult task. Their bravery wasn't about facing bullets. It was facing the unknown, with quiet, unwavering hope. Their impact whispers through victories, a powerful reminder of how one dedicated mind truly matters. Engineers who built bridges under fire. Have you ever thought about connecting to places when everything around you tries to tear them apart? During World War II, quiet heroes did just that. These were engineers, not always carrying rifles, but instead tools, blueprints, and an unbelievable resolve. Their job was to build bridges, often over wide rivers or deep ravines, and they had to do it while enemy bullets and bombs rained down. Here's the thing, in war, movement is everything. Armies need to cross water, get supplies, and move quickly. A broken bridge or a wide river could stop an entire operation. So, these engineers were vital. They worked at incredible speed, under unimaginable pressure, sometimes in freezing cold or scorching heat. Imagine trying to finish a complex Lego set, but your friends are throwing pillows at you, trying to make you fail. That's a tiny glimpse of the chaos and danger these soldiers faced daily. They were literally building pathways to hope. Each beam they put in place, each plank they laid down, was a promise that others could keep moving forward. It wasn't about fighting the enemy directly. It was about outsmarting the terrain, overcoming obstacles, making the impossible possible. Their courage wasn't loud or flashy. It was a quiet, stubborn strength, the kind that keeps you going even when fear whispers. So, when we think of heroes, let's remember these builders. They remind us that bravery comes in many forms. Sometimes it's the roar of a battle, but often, it's the steady, determined work of someone creating something new, holding things together, even when the world tries to pull them apart. Their legacy isn't just in the structures they built, but in the enduring spirit of resilience they showed. Even in the darkest times, we can still build. The farmer who hid downed airmen. Have you ever thought about what true bravery looks like? Not the kind you see in movies, but the quiet, everyday bravery. During World War II, many ordinary people showed this silent courage. Imagine a farmer, living a simple life, when the war landed right on his doorstep. This is the story of farmers who chose to hide downed airmen. So here's what happened. Allied planes, flying over occupied Europe, would sometimes get shot down. The pilots and crew, if they survived, landed in enemy territory. They were injured, scared, and far from home. If caught, they'd be prisoners, or worse. Imagine a farmer working his fields. He sees a parachute, or finds a scared young man in his barn. He knew helping this stranger meant putting his family home and life at enormous risk. Aiding an airman often meant death for everyone involved. This wasn't a choice made lightly. It was a moment where compassion battled fear. It's like seeing someone bullied. You know stepping in could make things worse for you, but you do it because it feels right. That gut feeling, that deep sense of humanity, guided these farmers. They saw not an enemy, but a human in dire need. They offered food, shelter, and a path to freedom, knowing that every rustle, every knock, could be the end, and that's why it matters. Their actions weren't about grand strategies. They were about one human helping another, even when the world said no. This reminds us that even in the darkest times, kindness can shine. Regular people do extraordinary things. Their quiet choices saved lives. They proved courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just a warm meal and a hidden bed. The spy with the dressmaker's shop. Have you ever wondered if someone you pass every day might be hiding a truly enormous secret, like the quiet librarian who writes novels, or the friendly bus driver who used to be a champion swimmer? Imagine that secret wasn't just a hobby, but something that could change history, cost them everything. Here's the thing about war. It needs more than just soldiers. It needs quiet heroes, the kind who blend in. Think of World War II and a small dressmaker's shop in Nazi-occupied Paris. It hums with sewing machines and smells of fabric. Customers chat about fashion. Who would suspect that behind the quiet smile of the owner, a spy network was being woven, stitch by careful stitch? This wasn't a story of visible heroes, but of hidden courage. That was the reality for many brave people. They lived double lives, their true work hidden behind ordinary fronts. It's like when you're working on a huge secret project for school, late at night, but during the day you act normal. Except, for these spies, the stakes were life and death. Every fake smile, polite conversation, perfectly placed button could be part of a larger plan to gather information, pass messages, or help people escape. They carried the weight of nations, pretending to care about hemlines while their minds raced with codes. It wasn't about gadgets. It was about immense courage hidden in plain sight, using routines as shields. It makes you think, doesn't it? Bravery isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet strength of a person living a lie so profound, all to protect the truth. Heroism can be found in unexpected places, worn like a disguise. Kids who collected scrap metal for victory. When we think of war, we often imagine soldiers, but have you ever thought about the kids back home? During World War II, countless children played a quiet but huge part. They weren't on battlefields, but they were soldiers in their own way. Their mission, to collect scrap metal. This wasn't just old junk. That metal, from broken toys to rusted pots, was desperately needed. It became tanks, planes, and ships. Every forgotten piece of metal had a new purpose, a chance to help in the massive effort. Imagine being a kid then, knowing your simple effort could make a real difference. It wasn't about being famous. It was about victory. These kids understood, even at a young age, that everyone had a role to play. They learned that great challenges are met by many small actions, all adding up. It was a shared promise, a silent agreement to do what they could for their country, for their families, for freedom itself. It's a bit like when you're working on a big group project for school. Each person has a task, even if it seems small. Maybe one person does research, another makes the poster, and another practices the presentation. If just one person doesn't do their part, the whole project struggles. But when everyone contributes, even tiny bits, the whole thing shines. That's what collecting scrap metal was like. But for a whole nation, they walked through alleys, combed through backyards, their eyes sharp, looking for any discarded metal. Each clink of a retrieved tin can, each drag of a rusty pipe, was a tiny beat in the rhythm of a nation fighting for its life. These were not just kids. They were quiet architects of victory, building hope one piece of metal at a time. So, when we remember the heroes of that war, let's also remember these young hands. Their story teaches us a deep truth. Even the smallest acts of kindness, courage, or duty, when multiplied by many, can change the world. Their quiet dedication reminds us that sometimes, The greatest heroes are found not just in grand battles, but in the everyday efforts of ordinary people doing extraordinary things together. The priest who sheltered refugees. Imagine a time when simply being who you were could put your life in danger. People were hunted, not for anything they did, but just for their background or beliefs. So, what would you do if you saw people needing a safe place, but offering that safety could cost you everything? That was the choice many faced during World War II, and it's how we find stories like the priest who sheltered refugees. This wasn't a hero who fought on a battlefield. Instead, his battlefield was the quiet, hidden rooms of his church, or his home. He opened his doors, not just for worship, but for survival. He took in strangers, Jewish families, political dissenters, anyone targeted by the war's cruel hand. Here's the thing about this kind of bravery: it often happened in secret. Think about how a tiny seed can crack through solid concrete if it just keeps pushing. This priest was like that seed, quietly, persistently, breaking through the wall of hatred with simple acts of kindness. He knew the risk was huge. Discovery meant not just his own death, but the death of those he protected. It was a constant, terrifying gamble. But his faith, his simple belief in human dignity, was stronger than his fear. He provided food, a place to sleep, and the quiet comfort of knowing someone cared. It was like offering a secret, calm harbor during a terrible storm at sea. His acts weren't loud or dramatic. They were whispered prayers, shared meals, and the courage to keep a secret that saved lives. And that's why these stories matter. This priest reminds us that heroism isn't always about grand gestures. Sometimes, it's about the quiet, determined choice to be kind, to protect the vulnerable, even when the world demands you look away. His actions remind us that even in the darkest moments, humanity can shine brightest through simple acts of selfless love. When fishermen became rescuers, have you ever stopped to think about quiet bravery? Not the big, showy kind, but the everyday heroism. Imagine you're just a fisherman, out on the water, focused on your nets, living a simple life by the sea. Then, everything changes. War arrives, crashing onto your home. People are trapped, desperate, with nowhere to run. What do you do then? This is exactly what happened to countless ordinary fishermen during World War II. Their small boats, meant for catching fish or carrying goods, suddenly found a terrible new purpose. They became rescue ships. These weren't navy vessels with powerful guns. They were simple wooden boats, guided by men who knew the ocean's moods, not battle plans. But here's the thing: when human lives hung in the balance, many of these fishermen did not hesitate. They understood a deep, unspoken call. Think of it like this. Say your friend falls and gets hurt. You don't think about whether you're trained as a doctor. You just react. You help them up, get them to a safe place. You use whatever you have, maybe your jacket for a makeshift bandage, or your phone to call for help. For these fishermen, their boats were their tools, their only way to offer help. They sailed into dangerous waters, often facing enemy fire, knowing they might not return. They weren't looking for medals. They were just people with boats and brave hearts. It really makes you wonder about the strength hidden inside us all, doesn't it? That moment when helping another person becomes the only choice, even if it means risking everything. It reminds us that heroism isn't always grand or planned. Sometimes, it's just a small boat, sailing into a storm, carrying a flicker of hope for strangers, and that's why their story stays with us. The invisible army of factory workers. When you picture a hero of World War II, what do you see? Maybe a brave pilot in the sky, or a soldier on a faraway beach. But here's the thing: many heroes never wore a uniform. They worked in noisy factories, far from any battlefield, doing tough, tireless jobs. These were the men and women who built the tanks, assembled the planes, and crafted every bullet and bandage. They were, in many ways, an invisible army. Imagine a giant, complex machine. The soldiers fighting on the front lines are like the visible gears, turning with power. But what about all the hidden parts? The tiny springs, the strong bolts, the oil that keeps everything running smoothly. That's what these factory workers were. Their dedication was the oil. Their sweat was the power. Every rivet they hammered, every wire they connected, helped make freedom possible. It wasn't glorious work, not in the way a medal-winning fight was, but it was essential. Think about a school play. Everyone cheers for the actors on stage, right? They get the applause. But what about the students who built the sets, sewed the costumes, or made sure the lights worked? Without them, there would be no play. The actors couldn't perform. It's the same idea. These workers were the backstage crew for the war. They might not have faced enemy fire, but they worked grueling shifts, often 12 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week. They gave up sleep, family time, and comfort. Many learned new skills, pushing past what they thought possible. They knew their work mattered, and that's why it matters to remember them. Their quiet strength, their endless hours, their belief in a bigger cause, that too was courage. It reminds us that heroism isn't always loud or seen by everyone. Sometimes, it's a steady, quiet effort, day after day, contributing to something much larger than yourself. It's a reminder that every single person, in their own way, can make a difference, even if no one is watching. From orphan to war hero. Have you ever thought about how some people start life with almost nothing? No family, no home, just uncertainty. For many during World War II, this was their reality. They were orphans, left alone by tragedy or circumstance. But here's the thing, their story didn't end there. Some of these young people, who had every reason to feel lost, found a different path. They joined the war effort. Imagine growing up without the safety net most of us have. Then, a huge global conflict like World War II breaks out. It could feel like the world was completely against you. But for some, the military wasn't just a place to fight. It became a home, a family they never had. It offered purpose, a chance to belong, and something bigger to believe in. They weren't just soldiers. They were people searching for a place in the world, finding it on the front lines, fighting for freedom. Think about a tiny plant trying to grow in a crack in the pavement. It doesn't have rich soil or careful watering, but with just a little sunlight and determination, it pushes through, sometimes even blooming into something beautiful and strong. That's a bit like these young men and women. They started in the harshest conditions, but they had an inner strength, a deep resilience, that helped them not just survive, but truly blossom into heroes. That their stories teach us something really important. Your beginning doesn't have to define your end. Even when life deals you the toughest hand, you can still choose how you play it. These heroes, who began as orphans, showed us that courage isn't just about what you're born into. It's about what you choose to do, the sacrifices you make, and the heart you carry, no matter your past. Their legacy is a quiet reminder that every person, no matter their origins, has the power to make a difference, to build a future, and to find their place in history. The janitor who listened in, have you ever wondered about the quiet heroes? The ones who weren't soldiers, but still changed the course of big events. World War II wasn't just fought with guns and tanks. It was also a battle of secrets, whispers, and unseen actions. And sometimes, the most important ears belonged to the people you'd least expect. Imagine a janitor, sweeping floors in a busy office building during the war. Maybe it was in an occupied city, or perhaps a place where important decisions were being made by enemy forces. People often overlook a janitor. They see them, but they don't really see them. They talk freely, assuming no one important is listening. But here's the thing, sometimes, the person cleaning the dust is the most observant in the room. This wasn't about formal spying, it was about everyday presence. About being there when crucial words were spoken, when a map was left open, or when a stressed official muttered something vital. These janitors, through their seemingly invisible work, sometimes picked up pieces of information, a schedule of troop movements, a code name, a planned meeting, bits of intelligence that, when shared, could save lives or turn the tide of a local struggle. Think of it like being in a crowded school cafeteria. Everyone is talking loudly, but if you're quietly clearing trays, you might hear snippets of conversations from different tables. You hear about upcoming tests, drama, or plans for the weekend. The janitors during the war were like that, but with much higher stakes. They might have been sweeping late at night, hearing hushed phone calls, or collecting waste paper with forgotten notes. And that's why it matters. Their courage wasn't about facing bullets, but about carrying the weight of dangerous knowledge, about deciding to act, to pass on what they heard, knowing the risk. It reminds us that bravery wears many faces. It can be loud and bold, or it can be quiet, observant, and deeply felt. True heroism sometimes comes from simply paying attention when others don't, and then doing what's right with that awareness. It's a quiet strength, often hidden, but powerful enough to make a real difference. The scientist who designed better tanks. Have you ever thought about how a pencil, or a chair, or even your phone, was designed? Someone had to think about how it would work, and how it would keep people safe, or help them. During World War II, a war that touched almost every family on Earth, There were people working far from the battlefields, yet their work changed everything for the soldiers fighting. We often think of heroes as the ones holding guns, charging forward. But what about the quiet heroes, the ones who used their brains, not their muscles, to save lives? Imagine a scientist working in a lab or a workshop, far from the booming cannons. This person wasn't a general giving orders. They were focused on one thing: making tanks better. Tanks were like armored giants on the battlefield, but they also had weaknesses. Maybe the armor wasn't strong enough in certain places, or the engine broke down too often, or maybe the way the crew sat inside made them too vulnerable. This scientist looked at these problems like a puzzle. How can we make this tank tougher? How can we make it faster or more reliable? It's a bit like when you're trying to figure out how to make your school backpack hold all your books without hurting your back, or how to make your bike helmet feel more comfortable but still protect your head really well. You're not fighting a war, but you're solving a problem that makes a real difference in your daily life. This scientist was doing that, but for machines that carried human beings into deadly situations. Every improvement, every stronger piece of steel, every tiny change in engine design wasn't just about a machine. It was about giving a soldier a better chance to come home. It's easy to forget these quiet battles of the mind, but their impact was huge. Each drawing, each calculation, each new material tested meant fewer lives lost, more victories won. It reminds us that heroism isn't just one thing. It's also the steady, thoughtful effort to protect others, even when you're not on the front lines. It's knowing that your brain power, your careful thinking, can be just as powerful as any weapon, sometimes even more so, in deciding the fate of people. This silent dedication, often unseen, was as vital as any shot fired, a profound act of caring in a world at war. Women who repaired warplanes. Have you ever stopped to think about what happens to a warplane after it's been hit? Imagine it, flying through dangerous skies, taking damage, and barely making it back to base. It's not just a dented fender. These planes are machines, vital for survival, often carrying pilots who were like family to those on the ground. When they landed, broken and battered, someone had to fix them, and fix them fast. During World War II, that someone was often women. With so many men fighting overseas, women stepped up to do jobs nobody ever expected them to do. They became mechanics, welders, and engineers. They worked in huge hangars, often cold and loud, surrounded by the smell of oil and metal. These weren't easy fixes. We're talking about mending bullet holes, repairing damaged wings, and getting powerful engines running again, all while knowing that someone's life depended on their perfect work. It's a bit like when your family car breaks down. Maybe it's a big problem, and your parents are worried about how they'll get to work or take you to school. You trust the mechanic to fix it right, to make it safe again. Now, imagine if that car wasn't just taking you to school, but was carrying someone into a dangerous storm, and their safe return depended on every single bolt and wire being perfect. The pressure these women felt was immense. Their hands, once perhaps only used for household tasks, learned to wield heavy tools, to understand complex blueprints, and to precisely repair machines designed for war. Their work was a quiet kind of heroism. They weren't on the front lines, but they were absolutely essential. Each plane they fixed meant another chance for a pilot, another mission completed, another small victory in a vast, terrifying war. It makes you think, doesn't it? How often the most crucial work, the work that holds everything together, is done by people out of the spotlight. Their dedication reminds us that strength comes in many forms, often found in the most unexpected places, doing the work that allows others to soar. The messenger who walked through danger. Have you ever had to deliver a really important message, maybe a secret note to a friend, or telling your parents something serious? It can feel like the whole world depends on you getting it right, but imagine that message could change the course of a battle, or save hundreds of lives. And imagine delivering it meant walking straight into enemy fire, alone, with every step a gamble. During World War II, messages weren't always sent by radio or telegram. Sometimes, the most vital information had to be carried by hand, by a person. These messengers were the living, breathing lines of communication in a world that could instantly cut them off. They carried orders, maps, vital intelligence, secrets that could decide life or death for entire units. Their path wasn't just a road, it was a gauntlet of snipers, bombs, and hidden dangers. Think about how you text a friend. You send a message, and it gets there in a second. Right. Now, Imagine if to send that text, you had to physically run across a busy highway, blindfolded, while cars whizzed by, and if you dropped the phone, or got hit, that message would be lost forever. That's a bit like what these messengers faced, but with much higher stakes. They carried the burden of knowing what their message meant, feeling the weight of it in their pockets, on their backs, in their minds. These heroes weren't generals or famous pilots. Often, they were young men and women, sometimes not much older than you, but their courage was immense. They faced the deep fear of the unknown, the constant threat of capture or death, all to connect to parts of a broken world. Their footsteps, though silent now, echoed with unwavering purpose. They remind us that true bravery isn't always about grand gestures, but often about the quiet, determined act of simply moving forward, carrying hope and vital information when everyone else has stopped. And that's why it matters. A family who rescued strangers. Have you ever wondered what it would take to risk everything for someone you don't even know? World War II tested people in ways we can barely imagine. It forced everyday families to make choices that would define their lives, and sometimes, even history itself. During those dark years, many families simply tried to survive, but a special few chose to do more. They opened their homes and their hearts to strangers, knowing that if they were caught, they could lose their own lives. This wasn't just bravery, it was a profound act of human connection. It was seeing another person's desperate need and choosing compassion over fear, even when that fear was very, very real. Think about it like this. Imagine you're at school, and you see someone being picked on, someone you don't know well. Most people might just look away, afraid of getting involved themselves. It's a natural reaction to want to protect yourself. But then there are those who step in, who speak up, even if it means they might get into trouble too. That's a tiny echo of what these families did. For them, the stakes were life and death. They hid people in attics, in basements, in secret compartments. They shared their meager food. They taught their children to keep secrets that could cost them everything. This isn't just a story about history. It's about what it means to be human. It's about the simple, powerful idea that every life has value. When a family decided to rescue strangers, they weren't thinking about grand philosophical concepts. They were simply responding to a human cry for help. They saw a fellow person in danger and chose to extend a hand. Here's what I found. It reminds us that even in the worst of times, the light of kindness can shine through, and that's why it matters. It teaches us that our choices, big or small, can truly make a difference, shaping the world around us with acts of pure, selfless love. Their courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about acting despite the fear, choosing hope for others when there seemed to be none. It shows us the quiet strength within ordinary people, a strength we all carry. The medic who went back for one more. Have you ever wondered what makes someone turn around when everyone else is moving forward? Imagine a battlefield, loud and chaotic. Shells are exploding, bullets are flying. A medic's job is to treat the wounded and get them to safety. But sometimes, a medic would finish their work, ready to leave, only to realize one more person was still out there. One soldier, maybe just a flicker of movement, left behind in the danger. And that's when they'd make a choice. They would go back. This wasn't about following orders. It was about something deeper inside. It was about knowing that every single life mattered, even when war tried to make lives feel cheap. For a medic in World War II, seeing one more person needing help was like seeing a single light still burning in a completely dark room. They just couldn't leave that light to go out. Think about it this way. Maybe you're rushing to catch the bus with your friends, but then you see someone drop their school project. It's spread out on the ground, and they look totally lost. You could keep going, make the bus, not be late, but something inside you might tell you to stop, to help pick up those papers, even if it means missing your ride. That tiny moment, that decision to turn back, is a bit like what these medics did. They put their own safety aside for someone they might not even know. It wasn't about being a hero in a movie. It was about being human. It reminds us that even in the biggest, scariest moments, the smallest act of kindness, the decision to care for just one more person, can make all the difference. It shows us the quiet, powerful strength found in not giving up on anyone. Teachers who taught resistance. What if school wasn't just about learning facts from a textbook? Imagine your classroom, but the lessons aren't just about math or history. Instead, they're about something far more vital: courage, hope, and how to stand up when everything around you feels wrong. During World War II, in countries taken over by enemy forces, many teachers faced an impossible choice. The new rulers wanted them to teach lies, to fill young minds with propaganda and hate, but some brave teachers refused. They knew that true education shaped minds and protected spirits. They inspired the next generation to think for themselves. These educators became quiet heroes, teaching resistance not with weapons, but with words, ideas, and a fierce belief in human dignity. Think about it like this. You know how sometimes your teacher shows you a new way to solve a tricky math problem, even when it seems impossible? These teachers did something similar, but for life itself. They taught their students how to solve the problem of oppression that was all around them. They might have quietly shared banned books, taught real history that contradicted official lies, or simply fostered independent thought. They reminded students of their own culture, their worth, even when the world tried to tell them they had none. It wasn't about big, loud battles. It was about small, brave acts in classrooms, day after day. It was about planting seeds of defiance and truth in young hearts. Those lessons stayed. They grew. They reminded us that even in the darkest times, the quiet power of a caring teacher and the strength of true knowledge can be a powerful force against injustice. Learning isn't just for good grades. It can be for freedom, for truth, and for the soul. The man who pretended to be a German officer. Have you ever had to pretend to be someone you're not? Maybe for a school play or a joke. Now imagine the stakes were life and death, and the people you fooled were the enemy. This is the story of a man, a hero in disguise, who walked that incredibly dangerous path in World War II. This person wasn't a soldier with a rifle. He acted on the most deadly stage. He learned the enemy's language perfectly, their customs, their way of thinking. He wore their uniform, ate with them, lived among them, all while secretly sending vital information back. Every moment he feared being found out. One wrong word, one slip, and it would all be over. He was a double agent, working for the Allies, appearing as a loyal German officer. It was a lonely, isolating existence, carrying this heavy secret daily. Here's the thing. Imagine your favorite sports team is playing a really important game. Your job, secretly put on the other team's jersey. You join their huddle, listen to their plays, then sneak info back to your coach. It would feel confusing, right? You'd worry your own teammates would see you, or the other team would realize you don't belong. The weight of that deception, even in a game, would be immense. For this man, the game was war, and the consequences were everything. It takes a different kind of bravery to live a lie for the truth. It's not about charging into battle, but the quiet, internal fight of keeping a false identity while your heart belongs elsewhere. This man endured immense pressure, sacrificing his true self daily so others might live. His heroism wasn't loud or flashy. It was a profound, silent dedication that reshaped the war from the shadows. It reminds us that courage often looks different than we expect, sometimes hiding behind the faces of our enemies. Pigeons carrying urgent news. Have you ever thought about how vital a message can be? A text from a friend, an email with big news. Now, imagine a world with no phones, no internet. The only way to send a life or death message, a bird. During World War II, this wasn't just an idea. It was a harsh reality. Pigeons, simple birds, became unexpected heroes. Soldiers, often cut off or needing to send secret updates, attached tiny messages to a pigeon's leg. These birds flew through explosions and gunfire, sometimes for miles, to deliver those precious notes. Here's the thing. These birds weren't trained for war. They just did what pigeons do, fly home. But their instinct, that simple urge to return, became a lifeline. Imagine a soldier, hurt and alone, holding a pigeon. He whispers his message, then releases it. You'd watch that tiny speck vanish into the dangerous sky, carrying all his hope. It's kind of like finishing a big school project. You've done your best, but now you wait for the results. You've sent your message. Something else has to carry it through. For those soldiers, these birds were their last hope. They carried calls for help, enemy reports, sometimes the only word back home. Each small paper held immense weight, life or death, victory or defeat. And that's why it matters. These quiet pigeons remind us that courage isn't always loud or human. Sometimes, the most important acts are done by the simplest things, driven by instinct. They carried the heaviest burdens of hope and survival across a world at war. It makes you think about those quiet heroes, doesn't it? The ones we often forget, but who did so much. The code talkers nobody talked about. Have you ever held a secret so important, so vital, that you knew you couldn't share it with anyone, not even your family? Imagine carrying that secret through a war, knowing it was saving lives every single day. That's like the immense power held by the code talkers of World War II, heroes whose stories stayed secret for decades. Here's the thing. During the war, secure communication was everything. Generals needed to send orders, strategies, and troop movements. Regular codes could be cracked. But what if the code wasn't written, but spoken? What if it was a living language, one so complex and rare that enemies had no chance of deciphering it? That's where code talkers came in. Many were young men from the Navajo Nation, using their native language to create an unbreakable code. They spoke into radios, transforming English messages into complex Navajo phrases. They used substitute words. A tank might become turtle, a bomb an egg. This was more than just translating. It was building a shield of sound, a fortress of words. Think about an inside joke you have with friends, a phrase meaning something only to you. Now, imagine that shared language, but instead of just making you laugh, it was deciding the fate of battles, and nobody else could join in or even know it existed. Their language, their culture, became a weapon of peace. But here's the quiet part. After the war, their work stayed secret. The military worried the code might not work again in future conflicts if the world knew. So, these brave men went home without public recognition. Their heroism was too important to celebrate openly. It wasn't until decades later their amazing story could finally be told. It shows how profound acts of courage happen in silence. And sometimes, the greatest sacrifices are the ones we don't even know are being made, quietly shaping the world without a single cheer. Their whispers turned the tide of war, and their silence held a different kind of strength. Young girls working in munitions plants, imagine your older sister, or maybe even you, stepping out of school and into a factory, not for a summer job, but for endless shifts, 6 or even 7 days a week. That was the reality for countless young girls in World War II. With men fighting overseas, factories needed workers. Teenagers, some as young as 14, traded their childhoods for the assembly line. Here's the thing. These weren't just any factories. They were munitions plants, places where bombs were filled, bullets were loaded, and artillery shells were made ready for war. Imagine the incredible focus needed, the careful hands. It was like solving a complex, dangerous puzzle every day. One wrong move, one moment of distraction, and the consequences could be catastrophic. Explosions and toxic chemicals were constant threats. This wasn't a battlefield, but it was their front line. Every shell they produced, every bullet they packed, directly supported soldiers fighting thousands of miles away. It's like a huge school project where one person's part is vital for the whole thing to succeed. But imagine that project was literally about saving the world, and your part involved handling explosives. That's the weight these young women carried. They gave up so much. The innocent fun of youth, the comfort of home, the chance to simply be kids. Their hands, once perhaps holding dolls or school books, now carefully handled metal and gunpowder. Their laughter might have been drowned out by the roar of machines. When we think of heroes, we often picture soldiers, but these young women, working tirelessly, bravely, in the shadows of danger, were heroes too. Their quiet, steady work helped win the war, and their contribution should never be forgotten. The blind musician who hid secrets. Have you ever wondered if what you see is the only truth? During World War II, appearances were often tricky. Imagine a quiet street in a city under enemy rule. People mostly looked for strong soldiers or secret agents, but sometimes a hero looked nothing like you'd expect. Think about a blind musician. They might play piano in a cafe or tune instruments. To an enemy soldier, this person seemed harmless, even helpless. They couldn't see what was happening, right? So, they wouldn't be a threat. But here's the thing. Not seeing with your eyes can help you notice what others miss. This is a deep idea. Without sight, other senses become incredibly powerful. Your ears pick up every hushed conversation, every distinct step. Your memory for sounds, voices, and patterns gets razor sharp. A blind musician might hear new enemy troops arriving, changes in patrol routes, or even secret codes. They could gather vital information right under the noses of those who thought they were clever. Think about closing your eyes and listening carefully. You'll hear sounds you never noticed. The fridge hum, a distant car, a faint clock ticking. Those sounds were always there, You just weren't focused. For a blind person, that heightened awareness is there every day, so a blind musician, playing music, could have been a powerful, silent spy. Their inability to see became their greatest strength. It allowed them to be overlooked, listening without suspicion. This shows us heroism isn't just big, flashy acts. Sometimes, it's using what you have, even a limitation, to make a difference. It teaches us to look beyond what we think we know, finding hidden strengths in everyone. Fishermen who evacuated soldiers, have you ever thought about how some of the bravest acts happen not with grand battles, but with quiet courage in ordinary moments? Sometimes, the most important heroes are just regular people, stepping up when it seems impossible. During World War II, a moment like this unfolded on the beaches of Dunkirk, France. Thousands of Allied soldiers were trapped, cornered by enemy forces, with the sea behind them. They were waiting to be rescued, but big Navy ships couldn't get close enough to the shallow shores. Here's the thing, help came from the most unexpected place. Ordinary British fishermen, along with owners of pleasure yachts, tugboats, and even private dinghies, heard the call. They didn't have to go. It was incredibly dangerous. But these men, with their small, everyday fishing boats, set sail across the English Channel. Picture this, a vast fleet of tiny boats, bobbing on the waves, heading straight into a war zone. Each boat could only carry a few soldiers at a time, ferrying them from the beach to the larger ships waiting farther out. It's a bit like when you see a lot of ants carrying pieces of food, much bigger than themselves, working together. Each ant does a small part, but together they move mountains. Or, imagine your whole neighborhood suddenly needed help after a big storm, and every person with a car or a strong pair of hands just showed up, without being asked, to get people to safety. That was these fishermen. Their small, individual acts of bravery, multiplied by hundreds of people, became a wave of rescue. They weren't soldiers, and they didn't wear uniforms. They were fathers, sons, and neighbors, risking everything with boats they usually used for catching fish or weekend trips. They saved an estimated 338,000 soldiers. Their courage wasn't about fighting. It was about choosing to help others, even when fear must have been pressing down on them. It reminds us that heroism isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes, it's a quiet decision to do the right thing, to simply be there for someone in their darkest hour. And that kind of quiet bravery can change the course of history. The black pilots who broke barriers, imagine wanting to serve your country, to fly high above the clouds, but being told you weren't good enough, not because of your skill, but because of the color of your skin. This was the harsh reality for many black Americans during World War II. They wanted to fight for freedom abroad, but first, they had to fight for basic respect and equality right here at home. Back then, the American military was segregated. Many believed black men lacked the intelligence or bravery to be pilots, but a very special group of men, known as the Tuskegee Airmen, stepped up to prove those damaging ideas wrong. They trained at a field in Tuskegee, Alabama, and through sheer determination, became some of the most exceptional pilots the war would see. These airmen flew fighter planes, guarding bombers on dangerous missions over Europe. Think about a time you really wanted to join a club or try out for a team, but some people whispered doubts, or maybe even tried to keep you out. They might have said you didn't fit in or weren't the right kind of person. How did that make you feel? Now imagine those doubts came from the very system that was supposed to support you, yet you still pushed through, excelling with your talent and hard work. That's like what these pilots did. They weren't just flying planes. They were flying against deeply unfair ideas, against prejudice itself. They painted the tails of their planes a bold red, and these red tails became a powerful symbol, not just of skill, but of protection. Enemy pilots learned to fear them, and the bomber crews they protected often asked specifically for the red tails, knowing they were the best at keeping them safe. Their bravery in the skies helped win the war, but their quiet determination and excellence on the ground also helped slowly change hearts and minds. Here's the thing, their story isn't just about battles. It's about what happens when people refuse to be limited by hate. It's about standing strong, doing your absolute best, and showing the world what you are truly capable of, even when the world tries to hold you back. And that's a lesson for all of us, always. The nurse who ran a secret hospital, have you ever thought about the quiet acts of kindness when the world was at its worst? During World War II, bravery wasn't always on the battlefields. Sometimes, it grew in the shadows, where danger truly lurked. Imagine a nurse, her name now forgotten by many, but her spirit shone bright. She didn't carry a weapon. Instead, she held something just as powerful: hope. This nurse, let's call her Anna, knew that many wounded people, especially those fighting for freedom, couldn't go to official hospitals. Those places were often watched by the enemy, or even controlled by them. They were traps. So, Anna did something truly incredible. She started her own hospital, but it wasn't a normal one with big signs. This was a secret place, hidden away in a damp basement, a forgotten attic, or an abandoned building. Every bandage changed, every fever checked, every whispered comfort was an act of profound courage. Think about a time you tried to keep a secret, a really important one, maybe a surprise for someone. You had to be careful no one found out. Right now, imagine that secret wasn't just a party. Imagine it was keeping someone alive, saving their lives, right under the noses of people who wanted to hurt them. If you got caught, it would mean terrible danger for everyone inside. That was Anna's everyday reality. She moved through the darkness, her heart pounding, but her hands remained steady. She risked everything, every single day, just to give comfort and a chance at life to people who had nowhere else to go. Her small, secret hospital became a quiet beacon in a dark, unforgiving time. It wasn't about grand gestures. It was about the silent, unwavering will to mend broken bodies and whisper courage into spirits. And that's why her story matters so much. It reminds us that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes, the most heroic acts are the ones quietly whispered in the dark, done by someone who simply refuses to let hope die, no matter the great cost. Building decoys to fool the enemy. Think about it for a moment. What if you could make your enemy believe something that wasn't true? Not with words, but with a trick so big, so clever, it could change the path of a war. In the thick of World War II, some heroes weren't firing rifles or flying planes. Their weapon was pure deception. They built ghost armies, incredible fake setups designed to fool the enemy. Imagine huge inflatable tanks that could be blown up in minutes, wooden airplanes that looked real from the sky, even fake airfields and barracks complete with painted roads and dummy soldiers. These weren't toys. They were lifelike illusions built to draw fire. The idea was simple but brilliant. Make the enemy waste their bombs, their fuel, their precious time attacking emptiness. This wasn't just about strategy. It was deeply about protecting real soldiers, real equipment, and the lives of people in real towns. It was a silent war, fought with imagination instead of bullets. A battle where the biggest weapon was a lie, told expertly, with incredible attention to detail. All to save precious human lives. It's a bit like a magician on a stage. You see the fancy scarf, the quick hand movement, and your eyes are drawn there. But the real trick, the secret, is happening somewhere else, hidden in plain sight. Or think about a clever movie scene, where special effects make you believe something impossible is happening right in front of you. That's the subtle, profound power these decoy builders wielded. These were often artists, engineers, and quiet, brilliant thinkers, working in secret, far from the front lines. Their bravery wasn't in charging a hill, but in designing a convincing illusion, in painting a shadow that felt real enough to die for. They had to think like the enemy, anticipate their moves, and craft a lie so believable it would redirect deadly attacks. They remind us that courage takes many forms, and sometimes, the most profound victories are won not with brute force, but with the quiet power of a brilliant, deceptive mind. They teach us that even in the darkest times, creativity and cleverness can be our strongest shield, saving countless human lives with nothing but a carefully placed fake. The waiter who spied for the Allies. Have you ever thought about how much you notice when you're just quietly observing? Like when you're in a crowded place and people talk around you. You hear snippets, see small gestures. For one brave soul in World War II, paying attention wasn't just a habit, it was a silent weapon. He was a waiter, working in fancy hotels and restaurants where powerful German officers often dined. Imagine him, moving through the room, clearing plates, refilling glasses. He wore no soldier's uniform, carried no gun, yet he was on the front lines. He served them food, but he also served the Allies. Here's the thing, these high-ranking officials would talk openly. They felt safe, perhaps important, with only a simple waiter nearby. They'd discuss troop movements, supply routes, secret plans, and he would listen. Every name, every date, every detail was a piece of a dangerous puzzle. This wasn't just gossip, this was a life-or-death mission. done quietly, carefully. Think of him like a human recorder, soaking up vital information. He had to remember everything, then pass it on without anyone suspecting. One wrong look, one forgotten detail, and his life, or many others, could be over. It's a bit like when you're in a group project, and someone is great at noticing small things. A teammate's mood, a detail in the instructions everyone missed. That person, just by paying attention, can save the whole project. But this waiter's project was helping save the world. His courage wasn't in grand charges across a battlefield. It was in the steady hand that poured wine, the calm face that hid a churning mind, and the quiet steps that carried vital secrets. He risked everything, not with a shout, but with a whisper. It reminds us that heroism isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's just a person, quietly doing what's right, day after dangerous day. Quiet acts of sabotage and courage. Have you ever thought about how some of the most profound changes come from the smallest, quietest actions? We often picture heroes in grand battles, but during World War II, countless acts of bravery happened in whispers, in shadows, far from the roar of guns. These were the quiet acts of sabotage and courage. It wasn't always about huge explosions or dramatic escapes. Sometimes, it was about tiny delays in a factory, a piece of vital information passed secretly, or a stubborn refusal to cooperate with the enemy. These everyday heroes knew that even a small stone dropped in a pond could create ripples. They understood that chipping away at a massive problem, bit by bit, made a profound difference. In lands under occupation, where speaking out meant danger, these quiet acts became a powerful form of resistance. People risked everything: their freedom, their lives, not with weapons, but with their wits and unwavering spirit. They believed denying the enemy even a little power, slowing their war machine, was a victory. This wasn't just fighting, it was holding on to humanity and the deep belief that evil wouldn't truly win. Think of a complicated factory assembly line. If just one tiny gear is slightly off, or a crucial bolt subtly loosened, the whole line might slow, or even stop. It's not a dramatic explosion, but the impact is real and far-reaching. These quiet heroes were like those tiny gears, causing big problems for oppressors, one careful, brave move at a time. Their stories remind us that courage isn't always loud or flashy. It can be a quiet resolve, a stubborn refusal, a small act of defiance that builds into something immense. It tells us that even when the world feels dark, a single person's quiet choice to do good can spark a light. That light can give others strength to find their own quiet courage, changing history one small, brave act at a time. The teenager who joined the resistance. Have you ever imagined being a teenager, just like you, but living in a world turned completely upside down? For many young people during World War II, their homes were taken over by an enemy force, cities were occupied, and rules changed overnight. But even when faced with overwhelming power, some young hearts refused to break. They chose to fight back, not with armies, but with quiet courage. This was the resistance. The resistance wasn't an official army. It was a secret network of ordinary people, hidden in plain sight, who dared to defy the invaders. These teenagers helped in small but dangerous ways, delivering messages under the noses of enemy soldiers, printing secret newspapers, or hiding those hunted by the regime. Think about seeing something unfair, like a friend being picked on. There's a feeling in your stomach, right? A strong pull to do something, even if it's scary. For some teenagers during World War II, that feeling was about their entire country, their freedom disappearing. Imagine a young person, maybe only 16, walking to school but carrying a coded note instead of homework. Every shadow might hide danger, every stranger an enemy. Fear must have been constant, a cold knot in their chest. Yet they kept going. They believed that standing up for what was right, even in small ways, could make a difference. And it did. Their actions, these small acts of defiance, were sparks in the darkness. These young heroes remind us that courage isn't just for soldiers. It can live in anyone, no matter their age. When faced with injustice, it's about choosing hope over fear, even when the odds seem impossible. Their quiet bravery shows us that protecting what you believe in, and helping others, is one of the most powerful things a person can do. Their legacy is a soft whisper of strength, telling us to always look for the light, even in the darkest times. Animal trainers who helped the war effort. Have you ever stopped to think about all the different kinds of heroes in a war? We often imagine soldiers with guns, or doctors saving lives. But what about the quiet, patient people who worked with animals? These were the animal trainers. Their role was just as important, though rarely talked about. They taught pigeons to carry vital messages across battle lines. They trained dogs to sniff out dangers or comfort injured soldiers. Horses pulled heavy equipment through mud and chaos. It takes a special heart to do this work. Imagine building a bond so strong with an animal that it trusts you enough to face terrible noise and danger. This wasn't just about commands. It was deep understanding, a silent talk between species. Humans and animals worked together, relying on each other in ways we can barely imagine. Think about training your own pet to sit. That takes patience, right? Now imagine teaching an animal to ignore explosions and focus on a mission that could save lives. That's a whole different level of trust and dedication. These trainers saw animals not just as tools, but as partners. They understood each animal had its own fears and personality. They knew a gentle hand and endless patience were stronger than any harsh command. This is why it matters. It reminds us that heroism isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes, it's found in quiet moments, in the deep connection between a person and an animal, both serving a purpose greater than themselves. Compassion, even in dark times, can forge the strongest bonds and lead to extraordinary courage. The woman who ran an underground newspaper. Imagine a world where the news you read, the stories you heard, were all lies. What if simply telling the truth, sharing honest facts, could get you arrested, or worse? That's what life was like for many people during World War II, living under cruel occupation. But here's the thing, even in the darkest times, brave souls found ways to fight back, not with guns, but with words, and with incredible courage. We're talking about women who ran underground newspapers. These weren't fancy, professional publications. Often, they were just typed sheets, sometimes handwritten, copied carefully, and passed in secret, from one trusted person to another, whisper to whisper, door to door. Their mission was clear, to print what was real, to share news. The occupiers didn't want anyone to know news of Allied victories, acts of resistance, or simply messages of hope and defiance. It was an incredibly dangerous job, like walking through a minefield every single day. Knowing one wrong step could mean capture, torture, or even death. The emotional weight they carried must have been immense. Think about a time you needed to share an important secret with a friend, something you knew would truly help them, even if it put you at risk. Maybe it was a warning, or a piece of truth that could change everything for the better. Now, imagine that secret wasn't just about school, but about survival, about the freedom of your entire community. That's the deep responsibility these women felt. They understood that lies, if left unchecked, can slowly crush a spirit, making people feel isolated and hopeless. But truth, even a whispered piece of it, can keep hope alive, like a tiny flicker that won't die in a strong wind. They knew controlling what people heard was tyranny's most powerful weapon. While soldiers fought on battlefields, these women fought for their people's hearts and minds, reminding them they weren't alone. Their quiet, determined courage was a beacon in a terrifying silence, proving truth, no matter how hidden, can eventually break through. Helping soldiers heal. Far from home, when we think of war, we often picture uniforms, battles, and maybe injuries that need bandages. But what about the wounds you can't see? The ones deep inside, far from any battlefield. Imagine fighting bravely, then finally returning to safety. You're no longer dodging bullets, but the quiet of the night might still feel like danger. For many soldiers in World War II, coming home wasn't the end of their struggle. The intense fear, the loss of friends, the things they saw, these stayed with them. People started to realize that courage wasn't just about facing the enemy, it was also about facing the echoes of what happened, long after the fighting stopped. Here's the thing, think about a time you had a really scary dream. Even after you wake up, and you know it wasn't real, your heart might still pound for a while. You might feel shaky. That feeling, that lingering echo, is a tiny bit like what some soldiers felt. Their bodies were safe, but their minds were still back in the fight, replaying moments of fear or sorrow. It's like when you trip and fall badly, the scrape heals, but you might walk carefully over that spot for a long time, even when it's totally safe. So, even far from the front lines, places were set up to help these brave individuals, hospitals, quiet rooms, and sometimes just people who would listen without judgment. It wasn't about fixing them instantly, because some hurts take a lifetime to mend. It was about offering a soft place to land, a space to slowly unpack the heavy burdens they carried. It reminds us that true heroism isn't just about fighting, it's also about the quiet strength to heal and the compassion of those who help. And that's why it matters, recognizing that courage comes in many forms, especially in the long journey back to peace within oneself. The translator who saved lives. Have you ever thought about how much power words hold? Not just big speeches, but the quiet ones, the ones that bridge gaps. During World War II, amidst battles, some heroes didn't carry rifles. They carried dictionaries and a heavy responsibility. Here's the thing, war isn't just fought with bombs. It's fought with misunderstandings, different languages, and fear. When soldiers captured enemies or talked to civilians, clear communication mattered most. Translators stepped in. Imagine understanding two sides in danger. A single wrong word, a misunderstood phrase, could mean life or death for many. It's like when friends argue, using different words for the same idea. You step in. Wait, you're both saying the same thing. You translate their frustration into understanding. Picture that, but with soldiers, weapons, and families, depending on your words. A translator wasn't just swapping words. They interpreted intentions, fear, and pleas. They understood not just what was said, but what was meant. Translators in prisoner camps calmed fearful soldiers. Others worked on battlefields, under fire, quickly translating surrender demands or urgent information. Their calm voices and careful words literally saved lives. They built bridges of understanding across chasms of hatred. So, let's remember these quiet heroes. They remind us that even in the darkest times, trying to understand someone else, or making yourself understood, can be a profound act of courage. It shows how powerful connection is, and how one person, with just their mind and words, can shape history, one conversation at a time. It's a quiet, but very important truth. Smuggling art from the Nazis. Have you ever lost something truly special, something that holds precious memories, or shows a unique part of who you are? Imagine that crushing feeling, but for an entire country's history, its very soul. During World War II, the Nazis didn't just fight with weapons, they also waged war on culture itself. They stole countless artworks, paintings, sculptures, ancient books from museums and private homes across Europe. This wasn't just about money, it was about destroying identity, about erasing the past and saying, your culture doesn't matter. Here's the thing, art isn't just paint on a canvas, it's a piece of a nation's soul. It tells stories of who people were, what they believed, what they dreamed. When the Nazis stole art, they were trying to steal memory, to steal the spirit of the people they hurt. They wanted to remake the world in their own cruel image. So, protecting this art became a vital act of defiance, a way to fight back without firing a shot. Think of your favorite song, or a family photo album filled with pictures of people you love. Now imagine someone trying to take all those things away, not just from you, but from everyone who cherishes them. That's how vital these artworks were. They were like the collective memories and most beautiful songs of whole nations. And here's what happened. Brave individuals, often in secret, risked everything to save them. These forgotten heroes became art smugglers, moving masterpieces under the cover of darkness, hiding them in clever places. They understood something profound, that even amidst terrible destruction, beauty and history were worth fighting for. They knew that sometimes, the greatest act of courage isn't found on a battlefield, but in protecting the fragile things that remind us of our shared humanity. Their quiet bravery ensures these invaluable pieces of our past can still inspire us today. The pilot who flew dangerous supply missions. Have you ever thought about what courage really looks like when no one is watching, when the applause isn't there, and the stakes are life or death? During World War II, many heroes weren't on the front lines, firing weapons. Instead, they were often high above, alone, facing invisible threats. These were the pilots who flew dangerous supply missions. They carried everything: medicine for wounded soldiers, fuel for tanks, even food to keep armies fighting. Imagine flying a slow, heavy plane, often at night, through skies filled with enemy aircraft, or over treacherous mountains, with no lights to guide you. Every single flight was a terrifying gamble. One mistake, one enemy plane spotting you, and it could all be over, far from anyone. But here's the thing, without these supplies, soldiers couldn't fight effectively, and people on the ground couldn't survive. It was like the bloodstream of the war effort, quietly keeping everything alive, even when the heart of the conflict felt like it was stopping. Think about a time You had to deliver something super important to a friend, maybe across town, and it felt like a huge responsibility. Now multiply that feeling by 1,000,000, and add the real danger of not coming back home. It's like being a single vital nerve cell, carrying a crucial message through a body under attack. If that one nerve fails, the whole system suffers deeply. These pilots were that nerve, carrying hope and survival on their wings, day after lonely day. Their stories aren't always in the big history books, the ones we read in class, but they're silent. Incredibly risky journeys kept the war effort going. They flew because others depended on them completely, pushing past profound fear with every mile. It wasn't about personal glory, it was about the simple, profound act of making sure someone else had a chance to live another day. And that's why it truly matters. It reminds us that often, the quietest acts of bravery, done for others without seeking recognition, are the ones that hold the most power and truly change the world, one risky flight at a time. It's a testament to the human spirit's quiet, enduring strength, even in the darkest hours. When neighbors protected each other, imagine a world turned upside down, a time when trusting the wrong person could cost you everything. What do you do when your government, or even your town, tells you to hate your neighbors, or worse, to turn them in? During World War II, many people faced this terrible choice. But here's the thing, countless ordinary people decided to do something different. They chose kindness. They chose courage. They chose to protect each other, even when it put their own lives at risk. This wasn't about big armies clashing or famous leaders giving speeches. This was about quiet acts, done in secret. It meant hiding families in attics, sharing precious food, or forging documents to help someone escape. It was a deeply human response to something truly awful. Think about it like this. If you see someone in your class being unfairly targeted, and you know it's wrong, you feel a pull to help, right? You might not have superpowers, but you might offer a kind word, or stand with them. That feeling, that deep sense of fairness and connection, is what moved these heroes. They understood that true community means looking out for everyone. It's like how a strong bridge isn't just one huge piece. It's many smaller parts, each supporting the others. When one part is threatened, the others come together to hold it up. These neighbors created a kind of human bridge, sheltering those who were most vulnerable. They knew that evil often grows in silence, and their small, brave acts were a powerful defiance against that silence. So, when we remember the war, let's also remember these everyday heroes. They remind us that even in the darkest times, the light of human connection can shine through. Their choices tell us that compassion is a powerful force, and that standing up for what's right, even in a small way, truly matters. The man who planted fake radio signals. Have you ever thought about how powerful a secret can be, or how just one person, working almost entirely alone, could change the direction of a massive war? During World War II, there were heroes who didn't fire a single shot, but instead fought with their minds, using clever tricks and careful deception. This section is about one of those incredible people, the man who planted fake radio signals. So, here's what happened. Imagine you need to move a huge army, maybe thousands of soldiers and tanks, right past an enemy that's watching your every move. It seems impossible, right? This man's job was to make the enemy believe a completely different story. He would send out radio messages, carefully designed to sound like a massive force was getting ready to attack in one specific place. But here's the thing, there was nothing there, just empty land, or maybe a few trucks making noise, pretending to be a huge armored division. It was like creating a ghost army, a phantom force meant to fool the enemy completely. This strategy works kind of like a magician's trick. A magician waves one hand to get your attention, right? While you're focused there, their other hand is doing the real work, making the card disappear or a coin vanish. In war, this kind of misdirection was everything. The enemy would waste their valuable time, their planes, their soldiers chasing after these fake signals, thinking they were about to face a huge battle. But all that time, the real attack was happening somewhere else entirely, catching them off guard and saving countless lives. It took serious courage and a deep understanding of how people think, knowing just what lies they would believe. It's truly amazing to think that some of the most important battles were actually fought in the air, with unseen radio waves carrying deliberate lies. This quiet hero lived in the shadows, his bravery not in big, loud charges, but in the careful planning that protected others. He carried the heavy weight of his secret, knowing that his manufactured stories were keeping real people safe. It shows us that bravery isn't always obvious. Sometimes the strongest shield isn't steel, but the clever, silent power of a well-placed idea. Girls who worked on farms to feed soldiers. When we think of World War II, our minds often go to soldiers on distant battlefields, planes flying overhead, and brave acts of courage. But here's the thing, war needs more than just fighting. It needs food, lots of it. Have you ever really thought about who made sure those soldiers, so far from home, had something to eat? It wasn't always just grown-up farmers. Sometimes it was girls, some not much older than you, who stepped up. Imagine this. Your dad, uncles, or older brothers leave to join the army. Suddenly, there are empty spots on the farm. Fields still need planting, cows still need milking, crops still need harvesting. Without this food, the soldiers can't fight, and families at home can't survive. It was a huge, silent crisis. So, what happened? Girls across America and other countries answered the call. They traded school books for pitchforks, dancers for demanding days in the sun and rain. Their hands, which might have been used for painting or writing, now knew the rough feel of soil and the heavy weight of baskets filled with vegetables. Think of it like a big school play. Everyone has a role. Some are on stage, getting all the applause. But what about the people backstage? The ones moving the sets, managing the lights, making sure the costumes are ready. Their work is just as important, even if no one sees it directly. These girls were the unsung heroes backstage for the war effort. They worked long hours, aching from head to toe, driven by a quiet but fierce belief that they were doing their part. They weren't holding rifles, but they were holding the very lifeline of the war. Their silent strength helped feed a nation and its fighting force, and that's why their story matters, reminding us that courage often shows up in the most unexpected places, doing the hardest, often overlooked, work. The doctor who saved a village. Have you ever wondered what it takes to stand up when everyone else is falling down? World War II was a time when darkness tried to swallow everything, yet light found a way to shine, often in unexpected places. Imagine a small village caught in this terrible war. Food was scarce. Fear was a constant companion. Then there was the village doctor. This wasn't a soldier. This was someone who healed, who cared. But here's the thing. Saving lives sometimes means more than patching wounds. It means making impossible choices. The doctor saw people suffering, not just from illness, but from cruelty. So, this doctor started making different house calls, secretly, carefully. This doctor helped people escape, guiding them to safety, one by one. Think about it like a tiny crack in a dam. You might think it's small, but if you don't act, that crack can grow, and the dam could break. This doctor was like someone fixing those cracks. Each person saved was a step against the war's overwhelming pressure. It was dangerous work. Every day meant risking everything, their life, their freedom. It took immense bravery to keep going, to put humanity above personal safety. And that's why it matters. This doctor didn't command armies or make grand speeches. They just focused on the next person who needed help. It reminds us that even when the world seems too big, too broken, one person's quiet acts of courage can create ripples. It shows how compassion, even in small gestures, can be the strongest force. Being truly human means choosing kindness, choosing to protect, even when it's the hardest thing. Sometimes, that's enough to save a whole village, in spirit and in body. Hiding a radio in a bread oven. Have you ever had a secret? Something so important that you had to keep it hidden, even from people you saw every day. Imagine that secret wasn't just a game, but something that could mean life or death. Not just for you, but for your entire family. This was the reality for many during World War II, especially in countries taken over by enemy forces. The simple act of hiding a radio in a bread oven tells a powerful story. In those times, the people occupying a country would forbid listening to news from the outside world. They wanted to control what people heard, to feed them only their own stories. But people still craved the truth, a connection to freedom. So, they found ways. A radio was more than just a box of wires. It was a lifeline, a whisper of hope, a link to the real news that the resistance, the brave groups fighting back, needed to share. Think about a bread oven. It's a common, everyday object in many homes, especially then. It's warm, often empty after baking, and generally overlooked by strangers. It's a perfect spot to tuck away something forbidden. The heat wouldn't bother a radio, and the smell of fresh bread might even mask other scents. The person listening would often do so in the dead of night, hunched over, the crackle of a distant broadcast filling the silence, knowing every second was a risk. One wrong sound, one neighbor's suspicion, and everything could be lost. Here's the thing, it's a bit like when you want to secretly message a friend during class about something really important that no one else is supposed to know. You might hide your phone under your desk, typing quickly, knowing the teacher could walk by at any second. The stakes were much higher for those with the hidden radios. It was about feeding true information, not just to one person, but potentially to a whole network of people risking their lives for freedom. And that's why it matters. These quiet acts, like a hidden radio in a bread oven, weren't just about getting news. They were about refusing to be silenced. They were about holding on to hope when it felt like all hope was lost. It shows how even in the darkest times, the human spirit fights for truth, finding courage in the smallest, most secret places. It reminds us that knowledge can be the most dangerous weapon against oppression. The engineer who designed landing crafts, have you ever thought about the quiet genius behind the biggest, most chaotic moments in history? Sometimes, the greatest heroes don't wear uniforms or carry guns. They design things. During World War II, one of the toughest challenges was getting thousands of soldiers and all their gear from large ships onto enemy beaches. This wasn't just hard, it was incredibly dangerous. Waves crashed, enemy fire rained down, and there was no easy way to get to shore quickly and safely. Here's the thing, someone had to solve this problem. An engineer, whose name most of us don't remember, stepped up. He designed a special kind of boat, what we now call a landing craft. These boats weren't built for speed or elegance. They were built for one purpose, to get men and machines ashore. They had a flat bottom, so they could get right up to the sand. And the most important part, a ramp that could drop down quickly, letting soldiers run out right onto the beach. Think about D-Day, or the fierce battles on Pacific Islands. Imagine being a young soldier, packed tight with your buddies, inside one of these crafts. You're bouncing on the waves. The air is thick with tension. Your life, and the success of the mission, depends entirely on this boat. It has to work. It has to get you there. It's a lot like when you need to move a really heavy piece of furniture. You can try to just drag it, which is hard and risky. But if you have a special dolly or a strong ramp, the job becomes possible, and much safer. This engineer built that ramp for entire armies. His quiet work on a drawing board meant the difference between success and disaster for countless operations. He saved so many lives just by thinking clearly and designing well. It reminds us that courage isn't only about fighting. It's also about solving problems, about building the tools others need to be brave. Some heroes stand in the spotlight. Others, like this forgotten engineer, build the very stage upon which history unfolds. The journalist who reported from the front lines. Have you ever wondered how we truly know what happened in a war? Not just the big battles, but the quiet moments, the fear in a soldier's eyes, the dust on their boots. For World War II, many powerful stories came from brave journalists who chose to go where bullets flew and bombs fell. These people weren't soldiers, but they stood on the front lines, notebook in hand. Their pens were their own kind of weapon. They believed the world needed to know the truth, even if that truth was messy, heartbreaking, and incredibly dangerous to gather. Here's the thing, it's easy to read a history book, but it's much harder to truly understand what war felt like, what it cost, without someone there to paint the picture with words. Think about a sports game. It's one thing to see the score, but another to hear the sideline reporter describe the tension, the sweat, the coach's frustrated shouts. These journalists were like that, but in a place where stakes were life and death. They reported human experience, raw and unfiltered. They faced the same dangers as soldiers, risking their lives every day. They saw things no one should ever see, felt the earth shake under bombardment, heard cries of the wounded. Then, they had to find words to describe it all, to make people back home understand the immense sacrifices. It took incredible courage to witness such horror and carry that heavy burden, not just in their memories, but onto the page. So, when we remember these forgotten heroes, we also remember the power of a story, the importance of bearing witness. These journalists helped us see the human cost of war, not as a distant event, but as countless personal tragedies and moments of bravery. Their words, carefully chosen and often written under fire, made sure those experiences, both terrible and inspiring, would not be lost to time. They made sure we remembered, saving books from destruction, What if all the stories, all the facts, all the history we learned from books just vanished? During World War II, this wasn't a made-up fear. It was a real threat. Armies weren't only fighting with weapons, they were also fighting over ideas, and that often meant destroying books. Think about it. Books hold our past. They carry voices from long ago, big discoveries, poetry, and struggles. When one side wanted to control everything, they often started by burning books. This was a way to wipe out different thoughts, to make people forget who they were. It was like trying to delete a whole library from everyone's memory. But here's the thing. Many brave people risked everything to stop this. They weren't soldiers. They fought a different kind of war. They hid books in secret cellars, smuggled pages across borders, and created hidden libraries. These were librarians, teachers, and everyday people. They knew a book wasn't just paper. It was a piece of the human spirit. Imagine your own journal, filled with your thoughts, your days, your dreams. Now, picture someone burning it, trying to erase your experience, not just your words. That's what saving books was like. These heroes knew losing books meant losing part of humanity. It's like your brain holding memories. If they're gone, a piece of you is gone. Books are like humanity's shared memory. So, when we think of World War II, we often picture battles. But there was also a quiet bravery, a deep love for knowledge. The people who saved books weren't just keeping old papers safe. They were protecting ideas, dreams, and freedom itself. They showed us that words, when saved, are powerful. They can build understanding long after bombs fall. Their silent work mattered so much. It reminds us that every story, every bit of knowledge we protect, helps keep our world whole. The soldier who kept spirits up. Have you ever faced a tough challenge, like a hard test or a big game? When things get heavy, what helps? A simple smile, a shared joke, or a kind word. On World War II, amidst constant danger, some soldiers had a different fight, battling despair. These heroes kept spirits up, knowing war wasn't just won with bullets, but with belief. Hope, like a small fire, needed tending. Imagine living in cold, muddy trenches, far from home, seeing terrible things. Morale would often sink, heavy as an anchor. But then, one soldier might sing a silly song, share candy, or tell a story. For a moment, fear would fade. It wasn't faking happiness, but finding small, real reasons to keep going. It was about connection, reminding each other they weren't alone. Think about a long school project. Everyone's tired, maybe frustrated. Then, one person steps up. They crack a joke, bring snacks, or simply say, "Hey, we've got this." Suddenly, the mood shifts, energy returns. They don't do all the work, but they help others do theirs. Here's the thing. In war, that little spark made a huge difference. It helped them endure cold nights, or face difficult mornings. So, the soldier who kept spirits up might not have won combat medals, but their courage was just as profound. They fought a different war, against the darkness within. They showed us that kindness, humor, and human connection are powerful weapons, and that's why it matters. Even in the worst times, a single light chases away much shadow. The teenagers who helped at home, have you ever thought about what it was like for someone your age during a huge war? Imagine a time when the whole world felt upside down. Your older brother might be off fighting, or maybe your dad. So, what did you do? You helped. You really did. Teenagers weren't just waiting. They were quietly, bravely, working on the home front. Here's the thing. War isn't just fought by soldiers with guns. It's also fought with spirit, with effort, and with every single person doing their part, no matter how small it seemed. While battles raged far away, young people were planting victory gardens to grow food. They collected scrap metal and rubber, knowing these materials would be turned into planes and tanks. They mended clothes, learned to cook with less, and cared for younger siblings, so their parents could work in factories. Think about it like this. If you're building a giant, amazing Lego castle, every single brick matters, even the tiny ones. If one little piece is missing, the whole thing might not stand as strong. That's how it was with these young people. Every vegetable grown, every piece of metal collected, every hour spent mending a worn uniform was a vital brick in the big picture of winning the war. They understood, in their young hearts, that their actions meant something. They weren't just doing chores. They were helping the people they loved and a country they believed in. And that's why it matters. These kids, not much older than you are now, showed us that courage isn't just about facing danger on a battlefield. Sometimes, courage is quiet. It's in the steady hands knitting socks for a soldier they'd never meet, or the determined face tending a garden in the backyard. Their actions were threads of hope, woven into the fabric of a difficult time. They taught us that even in the darkest moments, every helping hand, every kind act, builds towards a brighter tomorrow. Women who worked in shipyards. Have you ever thought about who built the ships that sailed into battle during World War II? We often picture men, of course, but here's the thing. When the war called, women answered. They stepped into shipyards, places loud with the clang of metal, dark with welding sparks, and smelling of oil and salt. These were not easy places. They learned to weld, to rivet, to operate heavy machinery. They were building the very vessels that would carry soldiers, supplies, and hope across dangerous seas. Imagine the weight of that responsibility. It was like being asked to build a giant, complicated puzzle, piece by piece, knowing that lives depended on every single connection you made. Each rivet, each steel plate, had to be perfect. Think of a big school project where everyone has a part, and if one person messes up, the whole thing falls apart. Now imagine that on a scale of an entire battleship. The women felt that pressure, but they also felt a fierce pride. They were mothers, sisters, daughters, who traded their home tasks for hard hats and heavy tools. They didn't just build ships, they built a future, one steel beam at a time. Their hands, once used for delicate tasks, grew strong and calloused. Their faces, once soft, were smudged with grease, and in their eyes you could see a quiet strength, a determination that echoed across the vast ocean. They were unsung heroes, shaping the very steel that held the war effort together. Their bravery wasn't in firing a gun, but in the relentless, back-breaking labor that fueled the fight. It shows us that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's the quiet hum of a welding torch, a steady hand, and an unbreakable spirit. Their work reminds us that strength comes in many forms, and often, it's found in the most unexpected places. The man who made forged papers. Have you ever thought about what makes you, you? Your name, your birthday, your family's story. These things feel so real, so solid. But imagine a time when those very things could put your life in terrible danger. During World War II, for countless people, their true identity was a death sentence. Here's the thing, some heroes didn't carry guns or fly planes. They carried pens, ink, and a dangerous secret. This is about the quiet hero who made forged papers. What does that mean? He created fake identity documents, new birth certificates, new passports, new ration cards. He gave Jewish people, resistance fighters, and others targeted by the Nazis a completely different past, a new name, a new hometown, sometimes even a different age or religion. It was like erasing one person and carefully drawing another, all on a piece of paper. But this wasn't for fun. It was literally about life and death. Think of it like this. Have you ever had to keep a big secret, or maybe even told a little white lie to protect someone? This was a huge, life-saving secret. Each forged document was a carefully made story, designed to fool sharp-eyed guards and clever investigators. If just one detail was wrong, if the ink didn't look quite right, if the signature wasn't perfect, everything could unravel. Not just for the person holding the paper, but for the man who made it too. He lived under constant threat, knowing that his quiet work was a powerful act of defiance. His work reminds us that sometimes, the greatest acts of courage aren't loud or explosive. They can be quiet, careful, and deeply hidden. He showed us how a piece of paper, meant to deceive, could actually represent the deepest truth, the right to live, to hope, to simply be, and that's why it matters. His gentle hand, working in secret, helped thousands find a new path to freedom, proving that even a carefully crafted lie can hold incredible power for good. Quiet heroes in the air traffic control towers. Have you ever thought about the heroes who weren't flying planes or fighting on the ground, but still held so many lives in their hands during World War II? We often think of brave pilots soaring through the sky, but high above, sometimes in small, cold rooms, others worked. These were the air traffic controllers. They were the calm voices guiding planes home, or telling them where to go next. Before advanced radar, these men and women used their eyes, their maps, and their voices to help thousands of aircraft find their way. Imagine being in a tower, the radio buzzing with static. You hear the faint, sometimes desperate, calls of pilots. A bomber, shot up and limping, needs to land. A fighter group, low on fuel, needs a clear path. The weather outside is terrible. Fog rolls in, or a storm hits. There is no room for mistakes. One wrong instruction could mean a crash. Many lives lost. The weight of that responsibility must have felt huge. These people weren't firing guns, but they fought a different kind of battle. Their weapons were their calm voices and sharp minds. Think of it like this: when you're trying to find your way somewhere new, maybe in a big, confusing building, and your phone's GPS suddenly stops working. Then, a calm voice on the other end of a phone call tells you exactly which turns to make, which stairs to take. That voice isn't with you, but it's your lifeline. It's guiding you safely through chaos. That's what these controllers did. But for them, it was planes full of soldiers, in the deadliest time of all. Their names don't fill history books. We don't see their faces on posters. But their quiet strength, their steady focus, and their long hours of concentration saved countless lives. They were anchors, holding hope steady in the storm. Their calm words were a shield against despair, a bridge between danger and safety. They remind us that courage isn't always loud or seen. Sometimes, it's a quiet voice, guiding the way home. The cook who fed an entire regiment. When we think of war heroes, we picture soldiers in battles. But what about the quiet heroes whose everyday work held everything together? Imagine that gnawing hunger you feel after a long day. Now picture that, constant for weeks, in brutal cold or heat, with bombs all around. That's where the cook came in. Their name is lost to history, but their job was crucial. This cook wasn't firing a gun. Instead, they stirred giant pots, peeled countless potatoes, and baked bread, often surrounded by danger. They made sure hundreds of tired, scared soldiers got one hot meal daily. Here's the thing: a hot meal was more than just food. It was hope. It offered warmth on a cold night, a taste of home. When soldiers felt worn out, that simple meal from a cook was a powerful message. It said, someone still cares. You're not forgotten. Think about when you're sick, and someone brings your favorite comfort food. It's not just the food, it's the feeling of care. For a soldier in a muddy trench, that warm meal was exactly that. It gave them strength to keep going, to face another day. It reminded them of simple comforts and love back home. So, as we remember the bravery of World War II, let's also remember the cooks. They were quiet, tireless heroes who fed entire regiments. Their courage was in caring, day after day, meal after meal. They nourished bodies and spirits, keeping hope alive. The village that didn't surrender. Have you ever wondered what it truly means to surrender? We often think of it as armies lowering their flags, but sometimes, giving up runs much deeper. Imagine a small village during World War II, surrounded by enemy soldiers, their homes taken over, their daily lives controlled. On the surface, it might look like they had surrendered, but that's not always the full story. Here's the thing: surrender isn't just about putting down weapons. It can be about giving up hope, letting go of who you are, or letting others silence your spirit. For many villages across Europe during the war, their physical freedom was lost. Yet, inside their hearts, a different kind of battle continued. They might have been forced to follow rules, but they never truly gave up their identity, their dreams, or their quiet defiance. They would share whispers of news, hide those in danger, or simply keep their language and traditions alive in secret. It was a refusal to let their spirit be broken, even when everything else seemed lost. Think about it this way: when you're working on a really tough group project, and it feels like nothing is going right, you could just give up and let your team down. But what if you keep trying, keep brainstorming, even if the progress is slow? You're not giving up on the goal. You're showing a quiet strength. These villagers chose to keep their light burning, even in the darkest night. They proved that true surrender is often a choice made within, not just an action forced from outside. And that's why it matters. Their quiet, everyday courage reminds us that even when facing overwhelming odds, the human spirit has an incredible power to hold on to hope, to protect what it believes in, and to simply refuse to be defeated from the inside out. It's a powerful lesson about inner strength that reaches far beyond any battlefield. The architect who built secret tunnels. Have you ever wondered about the quiet heroes? The ones who don't wear uniforms or stand on battlefields, but whose actions change lives. During World War II, many heroes worked in the shadows, their courage a whisper instead of a shout. Here's the thing: some of them built actual shadows, or rather, secret pathways to freedom. Imagine an architect, someone trained to design grand buildings, to shape skylines, But during the war, this person used their skills for something entirely different. They designed and built secret tunnels. These weren't for show. They were lifelines. They were dug beneath prison camps, under houses, even through city streets, all to help people escape danger, hide from enemies, or deliver vital information. It was like solving the most complicated puzzle ever, but with dirt and silence, and the biggest stakes imaginable. Think about when you're playing a video game, and you find a hidden passage, a shortcut, or a secret room. That feeling of surprise and relief, knowing you've found a way around a tough challenge. Now, imagine that feeling, but it's real life. It means escaping capture, reaching safety, or simply surviving another day. That's what these tunnels offered. They were silent promises of hope, carved out of the earth by clever hands and brave hearts. It required incredible planning, understanding the ground, the risks, and how to keep it all a secret from the enemy. And that's why it matters so much. These tunnels, often forgotten, remind us that courage isn't always about facing an enemy head. Sometimes, it's about the quiet, brilliant work done in darkness, building a path for others to follow. It's about using your unique skills, whatever they are, to create safety and freedom when everything feels lost. It shows us that even in the most desperate times, human ingenuity can literally build a way out. These hidden paths are proof that hope, even buried deep, can still lead to light. Helping refugees cross borders. Imagine, for a moment, your home isn't safe anymore. What if staying meant real danger, maybe even losing your life? During World War II, millions faced this impossible choice. They had to leave everything they knew, their houses, their schools, their friends, their entire lives, just to survive. But leaving wasn't enough. They needed to get to another country, a place where the war couldn't reach them. This is where helping refugees cross borders comes in. It wasn't just about showing someone a map or pointing a direction. It was about incredible bravery from ordinary people who chose to act. They were guides, smugglers, even just kind strangers who knew that a human life was worth risking everything for. Think of it like this. If your friend was stuck on the wrong side of a very busy street and cars were speeding by, wouldn't you want to help them cross safely? You'd look for gaps, maybe even hold their hand tightly. For refugees, the street was a heavily guarded national border, and the cars were armed soldiers, dangerous mountains, or stormy, unforgiving seas. The stakes were life or death. So many people, often quietly and without recognition, stepped up. They hid families in their attics or basements, led them through secret mountain paths at night, or helped them sneak onto small, often overcrowded boats. This wasn't legal in many places, and it carried huge risks for the helpers. If caught, these courageous individuals could face prison, torture, or even execution. But here's the thing. They saw another person's deep fear, their raw desperation, and they simply couldn't look away. They understood that basic human kindness meant offering a hand when someone was falling, literally at the edge of despair. It reminds us that even in the darkest times, the instinct to protect others, to offer sanctuary, can shine through with astonishing power. Choosing empathy, even when it's dangerous, shows the true depth of the human spirit. It asks us to consider what we would do, what we should do, when another person's freedom and safety depends so much on our courage and compassion. The woman who ran a safe house. Have you ever thought about the quiet kind of bravery, the kind that doesn't involve loud explosions or big speeches, but instead, a hushed whisper and a locked door? During World War II, many people faced terrible danger just for who they were or what they believed. Soldiers shot down, Jewish families hunted, people resisting the bad guys. A safe house was like a secret harbor in a storm. It was a normal-looking home, but inside, someone was hiding people from danger, keeping them safe from those who wanted to hurt them. Imagine being that woman. Every knock on the door, every shadow outside, could mean the end, not just for the people she was protecting, but for her own life too. She risked everything, her family, her freedom, her very existence, simply to offer shelter and a sliver of hope. It wasn't about fame or medals. It was about seeing another human, being in peril and choosing to act. Think about when a friend is really upset about something. Maybe they had a bad day, or something unfair happened. You might invite them over, give them a quiet corner, and just listen. You offer them a safe space to just be for a while. Now, imagine that bad day could mean capture or death, and your quiet corner could mean the difference between life and death. The woman running a safe house did that, but with stakes we can barely imagine. Her courage wasn't a sudden burst of glory. It was a steady, quiet light in the darkest of times. It reminds us that sometimes the biggest heroes aren't on the battlefields, but in the homes, doing quiet, dangerous acts of kindness. It shows us that one person's choice to care can literally save lives, day after day, in silence and secrecy. It's a powerful thought that simply offering a place to rest can be the bravest thing of all. Spies who posed as civilians, have you ever had to pretend to be someone you're not? Maybe to fit in, or keep a secret. Imagine doing that every single day, with your life on the line. During World War II, some of the bravest heroes weren't soldiers in uniform. They were ordinary people, living quiet lives, but secretly working as spies. These agents blended into enemy territory. They might have been a baker, a clerk, a student. No one around them knew their true purpose. They gathered vital information, sabotaged plans, or helped people escape. Their job was to seem utterly normal, while their minds raced with danger. It was a constant performance, a careful dance around every word. One wrong move, one tiny slip, could mean capture or death. Think about the immense pressure. Every morning, they put on a mask. They ate, shared jokes, and worked alongside the very people they were trying to outsmart. It's like a chameleon changing color to blend. For these spies, it was blending into a society that might hate everything they stood for. They lived with a deep, silent fear, knowing their identity could be exposed. Their true self, their hopes, had to be locked away. It's a bit like when you're really excited about a surprise birthday party for a friend. You have to act normal, talk about other things, even though this huge secret is buzzing in your head. But for spies, the secret wasn't about a party. It was about saving lives, changing the course of a war. The consequences were unimaginable. These forgotten heroes carried the weight of the war in their quiet, hidden lives. They sacrificed their very identity for the greater good. Their courage wasn't loud. It was a silent, grinding determination. It reminds us that bravery isn't always obvious. Sometimes, the most profound acts of heroism happen unseen, by people who chose to live a lie so that others might live a truth. Their quiet sacrifices deserve our deepest respect. The chaplain who comforted the wounded. Have you ever been in a really tough spot, maybe feeling overwhelmed or completely alone, and then someone, just by being there, makes everything feel a little less scary? Now, imagine that feeling on a battlefield, surrounded by chaos, fear, and the sounds of war. That's the vital role a chaplain played. These weren't soldiers carrying guns or medical staff with bandages. They were spiritual leaders, ministers, priests, rabbis who carried something far more precious, a message of hope and comfort. Their mission was deeply unique. While doctors tended to physical wounds, chaplains sought to mend the invisible ones, the fear, the despair, the profound sadness of being so far from home. They walked through the field hospitals and the trenches, not to fight, but to listen. They offered quiet prayers, shared moments of reflection, and often just sat silently, a calming presence when men faced their deepest fears. In a place where life felt cheap and brutal, they reminded soldiers of their worth, their faith, and their humanity. It's like finding a small, peaceful garden in the middle of a noisy, scary city. Their presence was a vital anchor. Think about it like this: when you're facing something truly difficult, like a big presentation or a personal challenge, sometimes the best help isn't advice, but just knowing someone believes in you. Maybe it's a coach saying, "I know you can do it," or a friend just sitting with you in silence. For the soldiers, a chaplain's gentle voice, or the simple act of holding a hand, could rekindle a flickering flame of hope. It helped them remember that even amidst terrible destruction, kindness still existed. Faith could still hold strong, and they were not forgotten. Their courage wasn't about bullets, but about empathy. It shows us that even in the darkest times, the greatest strength often comes from compassion and the quiet power of connection. From schoolgirl to spies helper, have you ever wondered what it would be like if your normal, everyday life suddenly turned into something out of a secret agent movie? Not the part with the fancy gadgets, but the quiet, dangerous part. During World War II, this was the reality for some young people, just like you. Imagine a schoolgirl doing her homework one day, and the next, she's helping a spy. It sounds wild, but it happened. Here's the thing: war doesn't just happen on battlefields. It creeps into towns, into homes, into schools. And sometimes, the bravest acts aren't about holding a rifle, but about holding a secret, or delivering a small package. These helpers weren't trained spies. They were kids, living under occupation, whose quiet courage became a vital part of the resistance. They might pass a hidden message in a breadbasket, or map out enemy movements they saw on their way to school. Their jobs seemed small, but they were like tiny gears in a huge, complicated machine. Just like how one missing puzzle piece can stop you from seeing the whole picture. One piece of information, even from a kid, could change everything for a spy. It's like when you're working on a group project, and someone's small research contribution, though not the main presentation, is actually what makes the whole project brilliant. It must have been terrifying, living with a secret that could mean danger, not just for you, but for your family. Every smile, every casual conversation, could be a test. These weren't grand public acts of heroism. They were silent, everyday battles fought in the shadows, by young people who chose to do something, anything, to help. Their bravery wasn't about being fearless, it was about being afraid, but doing it anyway. And that's why it matters. It reminds us that courage isn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes, it's a quiet whisper, a small errand, a steady hand. It's the choice to stand up, even when you're just a kid. The man who broadcast hope. Have you ever felt truly alone, maybe lost in a difficult moment at school, or when something just felt overwhelming? Now, imagine that feeling, but for an entire country, an entire world, plunged into the darkness of war. In World War II, fear was a constant, heavy blanket covering everything. News was often grim, and many people felt cut off, isolated by conflict, worried sick about loved ones. But through that silence, sometimes a voice would break through the static. This wasn't the sound of bombs falling or generals giving orders. It was the calm, steady voice of a man on the radio. He wasn't a soldier on the front lines, fighting with weapons. He was a hero in a different way, using words as his shield and his comfort. His job was to broadcast hope. His words were like a lifeline for people, huddled in bomb shelters or listening secretly in occupied territories. He told them stories, shared news of resistance, reminded them of the strength in their own hearts. Think about when you're feeling really down, maybe after a tough test or a bad day. Then, a friend sends you a simple message, just checking in. That small act, that quiet voice, can shift your whole outlook. Right, it makes you feel less alone. That's what this man's voice did. But for millions, he reminded people that kindness still existed, that courage hadn't vanished. He spoke of dawn arriving, even after the darkest night. His broadcasts weren't just facts, they were a whisper of human connection, a shared breath of bravery, and that's why it matters. Even when the world feels broken, a single voice, speaking truth and offering a glimmer of tomorrow, can be the most powerful weapon of all. It reminds us that hope isn't some huge, complicated thing. Often, it's just a calm voice reaching out in the dark, telling us we are not forgotten. Repairing bombed buildings under fire. How do you keep going when everything around you is falling apart? Imagine a building, your home or school, just hit by a bomb. Dust fills the air. Walls were gone. Roofs looked like broken puzzles. Yet, almost immediately, people started to work. They didn't run. Instead, they picked up bricks, cleared rubble, and tried to fix what's broken. This happened even as danger lingered. This was the harsh reality for many during World War II. Here's the thing, war isn't just about soldiers fighting, it's about ordinary people living through extraordinary times. In cities like London, Warsaw, or Berlin, bombs fell constantly, buildings were destroyed in minutes. But the human spirit, it's a powerful force. People needed places to live, to work, to shelter. So, repairing a bombed building wasn't just construction, it was an act of defiance. It was saying, you can break our homes, but you won't break our will. It was a quiet kind of bravery, often ignored. Think about when you've accidentally broken something at home, like a favorite mug. Your first reaction might be sadness, but then, you try to mend it, right? You get the glue, carefully put pieces back. It might not be perfect, but it feels whole again. Now, imagine doing that while more pieces are still flying, or more mugs might drop. That's a bit like what these repair crews faced. They tried to piece back a city, sometimes even as enemy planes buzzed overhead, before the all-clear siren sounded. It was a race against time and terror. These forgotten heroes weren't just skilled workers, they were symbols of hope. Each brick they laid, each beam they shored up, was a small victory against despair. Their work showed that even in the darkest moments, humanity strives for order, for safety, for a future. It reminds us that even when things feel completely shattered, there's a deep human need to rebuild, to heal, and to believe tomorrow can be better than today. It's a quiet lesson about resilience, about picking up the pieces, literally and figuratively, no matter what. The seamstress who sewed flags of freedom. Have you ever thought about how much power a simple piece of cloth can hold? During World War II, many heroes fought on battlefields, but others fought in quiet, hidden ways, often in their own homes. One such hero was a seamstress. Her tools were just needles and thread, but her work was just as brave, just as important. She stitched not clothes, but flags, powerful symbols of hope and defiance. Imagine a time when your country was occupied. Your own flag, the one that showed who you truly were, was strictly forbidden. To even display it meant terrible danger. People desperately needed something to believe in. They needed to show they hadn't given up. That's where our seamstress came in. She worked in secret, often late at night. Each flag she made was a small act of rebellion. It was a whispered promise that freedom would return. Think about your favorite sports team. When you wear their jersey, it's more than just fabric, right? It shows you belong. It gives you a feeling of pride. Now imagine that feeling, amplified 1,000 times. Imagine seeing your country's flag, knowing it's a secret message of resistance against a powerful enemy. That's precisely what these carefully crafted flags meant to people living under harsh occupation. Every single stitch this seamstress made was an act of quiet, profound courage. Each colorful thread woven carried a silent prayer for freedom. These small, illegal flags, hidden under floorboards or smuggled in baskets, were like vital sparks. They kept hope alive in the darkest hours. They reminded people that even when things seemed hopeless, their spirit was not broken. Here's the thing. Sometimes, the greatest acts of bravery aren't loud. They are small, determined choices made by ordinary people in hidden corners. This seamstress reminds us that freedom isn't just won with armies. It's also kept alive by the quiet, unwavering belief of individuals. One stitch, one symbol, one hopeful heart at a time. And that's why her story matters so much to all of us. The young boy who delivered messages. Have you ever had to deliver a really important message? Imagine it's not just important, but vital. It could mean the difference between life and death for whole groups of people. That's what some young boys did during World War II. These were not soldiers. They were often just kids, some as young as 12 or 13. Their job was simple, but terrifying. Carry information from one place to another. This wasn't like sending a text message. There were no cell phones. Radios were often too big or easily found by the enemy. So, people relied on human messengers. These brave boys would carry secret notes, maps, or even tiny parts for machines. They might travel through bombed-out streets, across fields, or hide in plain sight. They had to act normal, even when their hearts were pounding. Think about your brain sending signals to your hand to pick up a pencil. That signal has to travel perfectly, right? For these boys, they were the signal. They were the walking, breathing connection between resistance groups or army units. If they failed, or got caught, the consequences were huge. It wasn't just a game. It was losing a battle, or worse, lives. Each step was a risk, each street corner a potential trap. They carried the hopes of many in their small pockets. It's easy to forget these quiet heroes. They didn't wear uniforms or get big medals for firing a gun. Their courage was immense. They faced adult dangers, making choices no child should ever have to make. Their story reminds us that bravery isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes, it's a quiet step, a hidden note, and a heart full of hope, carrying the weight of the world on young shoulders. And that's why their part in history truly matters. Women who worked on the railroads. Imagine a time when the world shook, when men went off to fight and every strong hand was needed, who kept the crucial parts of a nation running. During World War II, a quiet army of women stepped forward. No uniforms or rifles, but their work was vital. They became railroaders, taking on tough jobs to keep trains moving. They worked on tracks, in roundhouses, as switch operators and welders, demanding tasks of heavy tools, grease, dirt, and long cold nights. With men at war, railroads faced a huge problem. Supplies, soldiers, everything needed to move. So, women, often for the first time, took up hammers and wrenches. They learned to repair engines, load freight cars, and signal trains. Hands once used for sewing now gripped steel, feeling the tremor of powerful engines. It wasn't just about a paycheck. It was about keeping their country strong, making sure soldiers had what they needed. Think about a big school project. If a key person left, and someone new, who'd never done that part, stepped up fast to finish it on time, that's like what these women did. They became hidden gears in a massive, humming machine, ensuring it never stopped. They didn't ask for praise, just did what needed to be done. They built a bridge of iron and sweat, linking home front to battlefront. Their story reminds us strength comes in many forms. Courage isn't always on a battlefield. Sometimes it's in the quiet, steady work of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, making sure essential parts keep moving even when the world feels broken. We remember them for their work and for the spirit they showed, a spirit that built a better future, one rail tie at a time. The scientist who helped develop radar. Have you ever thought about what it's like to try and find something important when you can't actually see it? Imagine searching in the dark, or through a thick, heavy fog. That's a bit like what the world faced at the start of World War II, especially when enemy planes approached unseen. But then, a quiet kind of magic began to unfold, thanks to a scientist working on something called radar. Here's the thing. Radar isn't about seeing with your eyes. It uses radio waves, invisible waves that zip through the air faster than sound. This scientist, and others like them, figured out how to send these waves out into the world. If a wave hit something, like an enemy airplane, it would bounce back, just like an echo. Specialized equipment could then listen for these echoes, and figure out how far away the object was, and even in what direction it was moving. It was like giving people a brand new sense, a way to feel the presence of things far beyond their sight. Think of it like being a bat. Bats see in the dark by making high-pitched sounds and listening for the echoes that bounce off objects. That's how they find tiny insects in the dead of night. This scientist gave us a human version of that superpower, but with radio waves. This wasn't just a cool trick, it was a shield. Before radar, cities were vulnerable. Bombers could appear out of nowhere, leaving no time to prepare. But with radar, suddenly there was a warning. Precious minutes to get defenses ready, to save lives. And that's why it matters. This wasn't a soldier on a battlefield, but a mind working in a lab, wrestling with equations and experiments. Yet, their quiet dedication led to a tool that changed everything, protecting homes and families. It reminds us that courage isn't always loud or seen with a uniform. Sometimes, it's the quiet power of an idea, sparked by curiosity, that truly helps protect the world. The miner who hid Allied soldiers. Have you ever had a secret so big, it felt like a heavy stone in your stomach? Imagine if keeping that secret didn't just get you into trouble, but could cost you everything, your freedom, even your life. This is the incredible, heart-wrenching secret a humble miner carried deep within the earth during World War II. Picture this man. He spent his days in the deep, echoing darkness of coal mines. He knew every narrow shaft, every hidden chamber, every drip of water. But then, war came. Allied soldiers, pilots, shot down, or prisoners escaped, found themselves lost and hunted behind enemy lines. They needed more than just a hiding spot. They needed a protector. And here's the thing. This miner chose to be that protector. He used the very tunnels he knew so well to hide them. Think about how scary that must have been. Deep underground, cold, damp, completely dark. It was a terrifying place for anyone. But for these soldiers, it offered a thin thread of hope. The miner risked his own safety constantly. He would bring them food, water, and news. Each whisper, each creaking sound, each unexpected shadow could mean German soldiers were nearby, ready to discover his secret friends. It's like when you're trying to keep a big surprise from a friend, and every little clue feels like it will give everything away. But this was far, far more serious. This was about life or death for everyone. Why choose such a dangerous path? Because sometimes, when faced with terrible cruelty, ordinary people show extraordinary courage. They see a basic truth. Every single life holds immense value. This miner could have just looked away, kept himself safe, but he made the choice to protect, even when that meant living with constant, icy fear. His bravery wasn't loud. It wasn't seen on a grand battlefield. Instead, it was quiet, hidden in the deepest darkness, a steady, flickering flame of human kindness. And that's why this story truly matters. It teaches us that true heroism isn't always about big, flashy acts. Sometimes, it's found in the small, difficult choices made when no one else is watching, deep in the shadows, where the purest light of human goodness shines brightest. It reminds us that even in the darkest times, people can choose to be a light for others. How ordinary people became heroes. Have you ever paused to think about what a hero truly is? It's easy to imagine them as bigger-than-life figures, people born with special powers or fearless hearts. But here's the thing about the heroes of World War II. Many of them were just ordinary people. They were neighbors, shopkeepers, students, teachers. They didn't wear capes, and most didn't carry weapons. They were just like us, living normal lives until the war reached their doorstep. The war forced unimaginable choices on everyone. It brought darkness, cruelty, and fear. And in that darkness, ordinary people found a light inside themselves. They weren't looking for glory or medals. They saw something terribly wrong happening, and they chose to act. Maybe it was hiding a family, sharing a meager meal, or refusing to give up a secret. These weren't grand public acts, but quiet moments of immense courage. Think about a small seed buried in the earth. It looks plain, like nothing special, but with a little water, some sun, and the pressure of the soil around it, that seed pushes through. It grows, strong and resilient, eventually becoming a plant or a tree. The potential for growth was always there, inside that ordinary seed. In the same way, the immense pressure of war didn't just break people. For many, it woke up something strong and good inside them. It brought out a deep humanity that had been waiting. So, what we learn from them is this: courage isn't a superpower you're born with. It's often a quiet choice, a spark within us that ignites when the world feels dark. It reminds us that every single person, no matter how ordinary they seem, carries the potential for extraordinary goodness, waiting for the moment to shine. The nurse who volunteered for danger. Have you ever wondered what makes someone walk towards danger instead of away from it? Think about that for a moment. When things get scary, our natural instinct is often to retreat, to find safety. But during World War II, many nurses did the exact opposite. They weren't soldiers carrying rifles, but they chose to be right there, in the chaos, near the front lines. Here's the thing: they knew the risks. They knew the screams, the injuries, the constant threat of bombs or enemy fire. Yet, they volunteered. This wasn't just a job for them. It was a profound choice, a deep act of humanity. Imagine the fear they must have felt, but also the urgent, overwhelming need to help others who were suffering. It wasn't about fighting the enemy. It was about fighting death itself, trying to bring comfort and healing in a world gone mad. Their battlefield was the wounded body, the broken spirit. Consider this: when a friend falls and gets really hurt, maybe on the sports field or in the schoolyard, it might feel a little scary or even gross to see the injury up close. Others might just stare, but you push past that feeling because you know they need you. You offer a hand, a kind word, or go get help. That deep care, that quiet strength to step up when it's hard, is a tiny echo of what these nurses felt. They saw immense pain and chose to face it every single day. So, when we remember these forgotten heroes, remember the nurses who volunteered for danger. They chose hope. They chose compassion. They stood for life amidst destruction, holding hands, changing bandages, whispering comforting words. And that's why their stories matter so much. They remind us that even in the darkest times, courage isn't just about fighting. It's also about caring, about the quiet power of helping others when no one else will. Building a secret landing strip. Have you ever tried to keep a big secret? Maybe it was a surprise for a friend, or a hidden spot you found in the woods. Now, imagine if that secret wasn't just a fun game, but something that meant life or death for many people. During World War II, this kind of secret was very real. Sometimes, planes had to land far behind enemy lines, not on big, fancy airfields that everyone knew about. Instead, they needed places no one was supposed to find. These were secret landing strips. Think about it. How do you build an airport in secret, in the middle of a war zone? It wasn't easy. In fact, it was incredibly dangerous. Often, it was local people, farmers, villagers, or resistance fighters who took on this impossible task. They used shovels, pickaxes, and sometimes just their bare hands. They worked in the dark, under the constant threat of being discovered by enemy soldiers. They had to clear fields, chop down trees, and level uneven ground. Each rock they moved, each branch they cleared, was an act of quiet defiance. They were building a lifeline, piece by careful piece. These hidden strips were like vital veins. They brought in weapons for those fighting back, medicine for the wounded, and sometimes they helped rescue downed pilots or moved important people to safety. It wasn't about huge battles seen on the news. It was about the power of small, careful steps taken by many brave individuals. Think about a time you worked really hard on something, a big project for school maybe. You spent hours working quietly, making sure every detail was perfect. No one saw all the effort, the careful planning, the small adjustments you made until the project was finally done. These secret landing strips were like that, but with incredible danger. They were massive, hidden projects, vital to the bigger picture of the war. The people who built these strips weren't always soldiers in uniform. They were ordinary people, just like us, who found incredible courage deep inside. They understood that even the smallest, most secret act of bravery could change everything. Their quiet strength reminds us that hope can be built, carefully and patiently, even in the darkest times, often by people no one remembers. The man who fixed broken hearts and radios. Have you ever felt like something inside you was broken? Not a bone, but something deeper, like your spirit or your hope. During World War II, many things broke. Radios, tanks, buildings, but people broke too. Their courage, their connections, their very hearts. Our story today is about a quiet hero who understood both kinds of brokenness. He was a radio mechanic, yes, but he also fixed what couldn't be seen. During wartime, a broken radio was more than just a broken machine. Imagine being far from home, with only crackling static connecting you to the world. No news from family, no orders, no comfort. That silence felt deafening, and loneliness crept in. This hero knew getting those voices and clear signals back was like mending a piece of someone's soul. He didn't just solder wires. He reconnected hope, reminding soldiers and civilians they weren't forgotten. Think about when your phone's Wi-Fi stops working. You can't connect with friends, miss messages, feel cut off. Now imagine that on a battlefield, where connection meant survival, or hearing a loved one's voice. Restoring that signal was a huge gift, like a good friend who listens when you're sad, making you feel heard and less alone. Sometimes, just knowing someone cares enough to fix anything at all makes all the difference. This forgotten hero taught us real strength isn't just fighting with a rifle. It's also the quiet work of rebuilding, repairing, and reminding people they aren't alone. A small repair can spark huge relief and human connection. Caring for both machines and the human spirit makes a hero truly unforgettable, leaving a mark far deeper than any battle scar. The woman who trained spy dogs can. You imagine asking a dog to go where humans couldn't, to carry a secret message or even a small bomb, knowing it might not return. It's a heavy thought, isn't it? This is the story of Mrs. Margaret Erlanger, a woman whose efforts, like many, have been forgotten. She helped make this reality, not for glory, but out of necessity. In the chaos of World War II, every small advantage mattered. Armies looked to animals too, especially dogs. Here's the thing, dogs have senses far beyond ours. Their noses can pick up scents we can't even dream of. Their hearing is sharper, catching sounds long before we do. But training a dog to be a spy, to understand a mission, to bravely face danger for a cause it can't grasp, that's something else entirely. Mrs. Erlanger took regular dogs, often family pets donated to the war effort, and taught them amazing, impossible-sounding tasks. She worked with quiet patience, building an unbreakable trust. They learned to run silently through enemy lines, delivering vital messages hidden in tiny pouches, carrying medical supplies to wounded soldiers, or even wearing special vests with explosives to disable enemy tanks. It asks so much of a creature. Think about how you trust your own dog, or even a close friend. You know they'll be there for you, right? These dogs had to trust their human trainer completely, believing in Mrs. Erlanger's commands, even when those commands led them into terrifying situations. It's like when you're learning something new and difficult, like a complex math problem or a new sport. You rely on your teacher or coach to guide you, trusting they know what they're doing. These dogs relied on Mrs. Erlanger with their lives, placing their absolute faith in her quiet voice and steady hand. So many heroes of that war wore uniforms, carrying rifles or flying planes, but there were also these quiet, furry heroes, guided by a determined woman who saw their unique potential. Their sacrifices were just as real, just as meaningful, and in their bravery, and in Mrs. Erlanger's patient dedication, we see a different kind of courage, a loyalty that asks for nothing in return, only a gentle hand and a trusted voice. It makes you wonder about all the hidden strengths around us, in humans and animals alike, and the quiet people who help them shine even in the darkest times. When kids carried the weight of war, have you ever thought about what it means to grow up too fast? To have huge responsibilities land on your shoulders long before you're ready. During World War II, this wasn't a choice for many kids. They weren't just playing games or going to school. They were working in factories, delivering messages, helping on farms, even fighting. Their childhoods were stolen by the needs of a world at war. Imagine a whole country struggling, with fathers, brothers, and sometimes even mothers, sent away to fight. Who would fill their shoes? Often, it was the children left behind. It wasn't about being a hero in a grand battle, but about the quiet courage of everyday tasks. They weren't asked if they wanted to help. They simply had to. Their homes, their towns, their futures depended on it. Think about a huge group project at school. If half your team suddenly disappears, the rest of you have to work twice as hard, right? You pull all-nighters, learn new skills, do jobs you never expected. That's a tiny glimpse. But for these kids, the project was survival, and the stakes were life and death. They became adults overnight, their hands doing grown-up work, their minds carrying grown-up worries. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, about the strength hidden inside us, even when we feel small. These kids didn't choose the war, but they chose to endure, to contribute. They didn't wear uniforms in the trenches, but their efforts kept their nations going. Their stories remind us that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just showing up, day after day, doing what needs to be done. It's a quiet bravery, often unseen, but profoundly powerful. And that's why their forgotten efforts still matter so much today. The unseen hands that won the war. When we picture World War II, what comes to mind? Brave soldiers, perhaps, or pilots in the sky. But here's the thing, war isn't just fought on battlefields. It's also fought in factories, on farms, in quiet offices, and even in homes. It's about people whose names never made it into history books. These were the unseen hands, working tirelessly behind the scenes, whose quiet efforts truly helped win the war. Think about it like this. A great school play needs more than just actors. There are people who build sets, design costumes, and manage lights and sound. They spend hours making sure everything is perfect. Their faces might not be seen in the final bow, but without them, the show couldn't happen. Their hard work makes the magic possible. That's how it was during the war, but on a much larger, more serious scale. While soldiers faced danger, millions of others were busy making sure those soldiers had what they needed. Women worked in ammunition factories, building planes and tanks. Farmers grew food to feed the nation and the troops. Scientists worked in secret labs, developing new technologies and medicines. Codebreakers spent endless nights deciphering enemy messages, their minds fighting a silent war of their own. Children collected scrap metal for recycling. Everyone had a part to play. These were everyday people, just like us. They might have been scared, tired, or lonely, but they showed up, day after day, doing their part with a quiet strength that's truly amazing. They didn't ask for glory, they just kept going, believing in the bigger cause. And that's why it matters, because the biggest victories are often built on countless small, unseen acts of courage and dedication. It reminds us that every single person's effort, no matter how small it feels, can add up to something truly powerful.